Okay, well, hello, Aurora. Thank you for joining me today for the part two Q&A interview about Atlantis. The last video we shot together was almost 4 hours long. Everything you shared was just so fascinating. I just felt so overwhelmed because every sentence you said just spawned 10 more questions. And you're saying something else profound, and I'm just catching up and asking a question from half an hour ago, and it was just kind of ridiculous. But this video is to ask those questions that I haven't been able to ask yet, and to have you share more about aspects about Atlantis that you haven't been able to share yet.
Just want to thank you so much for initiating this conversation. Talking about Atlantis is actually one of my favorite things. Like it is like positive, fond memories of a very positive place. And I hope that other people will be able to tune into that energy and that just, good feelings about that. It's, just I think a very uplifting topic.
Well, everything does feel so uplifting, and that's why we're having this conversation, because you had mentioned that we have to be Atlantis 2.0 to make it to the next generation and on and on. So to make it there, we have to know what that entails. So I love listening to everything that you share. And so let's talk about animals. That's where we ended on in the last video. You had a lot to say about animals. So let's start there. Can we have a refresher on what we talked about?
Yeah, so I'm not sure. I don't remember word for word what we've already talked about, but in our life in Atlantis was being telepathic as a whole entire community in this world or on this planet. So here in this world now, to contrast, everyone is very human-centered, anthropocentric, like because humans use language and humans are talking to one another through verbal language, and humans only perceive and recognize and respect the intelligence of other humans and greatly, greatly diminish the intelligence of the natural world, plants and animals, even the mineral realm. But to redirect to what our life is like in Atlantis, we are totally telepathically connected to all of the life that is here on the planet and the total holistic presence of the planet herself. And so our main way of communicating with life forms is telepathy, not verbal communication. And that means that we can communicate with vastly different types of life. Like a rock doesn't have a mouth. It's not going to talk to you with verbalized language, but it can absolutely have a consciousness presence and share information with you. And you can have a rapport or an energetic exchange with it. And we did all the time. So in that contextualization, for us, first of all, also, just to refresh, in ancient current Atlantis, we are light eaters and we don't eat physical plants and animals. We eat the frequency that comes off of living creatures and we eat the energy of the sun. But all of that really changes the entire dynamic of interactions, because in the world that you guys are familiar with here, where we're talking on a computer, everyone is like, the first thing that you do when you interact with something, you're like, can I eat it? That's it. You're just like, is it edible? And the other thing is thinking the same thing, looking at you, like if you meet an animal, you're like, can I eat you? And the animal's like, can I eat you? And that's just the underlying subtext of all of these interactions that we have, right? But we didn't have that as the primary subtext in our interactions. We didn't have that as the primary motivation. So here, there's peaceful people here who would walk up to an animal and would be interested in talking, but mostly here, like there's the whole, deeply ingrained hunter instinct to hunt after an animal. But no, what we would do is have beautiful relationships with animals. We didn't have to eat any of them. We certainly didn't domesticate them. So that's another thing that would be unthinkable in our lives in Atlantis. We would never consider the process of diminishing the freedom of a sovereign creature, of diminishing its ability to move where it wants to move, like to put it in a cage or an enclosure, or to limit or inhibit its own reproduction. Although I will tell you, reproduction, both plant, animal, and human, was wildly different, or is wildly different. in Atlantis, to the point that I'm not even prepared to be able to like talk about it. I can't even, to use modern slang, I can't even. And so just gloss over that until we're ready to be able to delve more deeply into that. But we would never domesticate a creature. We live in freedom, and the freedom state is totality state for our whole entire world. So just as we would never want to have our own movement or thought structure or self-expression limited, we would not do it to another organism, and certainly not for our convenience. So everything was done for respect. Because another thing you could think about, like, what about if you're like, well, these fireflies, like little like glow bugs or whatever, what if we put them in a jar? Like if you were a child and you ever ran around and caught them, and then you're like, now this will be my night light, and I'll put this in my house at night. Like, not only we didn't need to have night lights to be able to see, because your psychic presence really illuminates the world. We didn't have to have a torch or fire or a candle to see at night, so we wouldn't be motivated to entrap lightning bugs in a jar to use it as a type of artificial light. But even if we did need artificial light, we would never think like, I'm going to take these free creatures that are flying all around. And the key point is that they are following their divine motivation. Like in Atlantis, we are so connected to the divine and to the impetus for behavior that comes directly from the divine presence, that tells us what every step and everything that we do throughout our day is because higher intelligence tells us what to do. Well, we give that same respect to all other animals. So if there's like a little insect flying around, it is flying in the exact way that it is supposed to, because of its divine mandate and because of its freedom of consciousness. So we would be like, I'm not going to get between it and its divine mandate. I'm, of course, going to allow it to be free. So in that world, if a bunch of lightning bugs chose to coalesce around you in a small glowing orb and give their light to you, that's the only way that that could happen. They would have to choose of their own accord, and maybe it would even be telepathic. Maybe if you were like, wow, like I wish I had a glowing sphere of lightning bugs clustered over here, then they'd all be like, let's do it. Like, Aurora wants this, let's do it. But it would be a fun thing between it. It would never be training. It would never be training. It would be more like friendship. And so, I know my little dog, she was just here a second ago. I heard her little foot paws, but I would have tilted the camera down so you could see, like, in this world, I have a little dog and we love each other. We are like each other's soulmate, and it's beautiful, but we have very, very clear boundaries of domestication. Like, I am her owner and she walks on a leash and she's trained to do this and that, and this is appropriate behavior and not appropriate behavior. And you have to do that in this world in order to keep your domesticated animals safe. But in the world of Atlantis, we did not have ownership over living creatures. We were not owned and we did not own others. And so, of course, everything would be by friendship. It would be by request. In the same way that like Landley, like, you're my friend. If you came to my house, I would, allow you in freedom to be like, maybe you want to sit on the couch, or maybe you want to sit on the floor, or maybe you want to do this or that. I would offer you food and drink, but I would never be like, Landley, come here, sit down now. now you will eat this cookie. I will give you this cookie. Like, the same way that I have that rapport with my dog, I would never do that with you. So just transfer the same level of respect that you have with your human colleagues and peer group to animals. And that was our relationship with animals. So you also, like, we didn't have domesticated animals in the sense of what the work that animals can do for us. So we didn't keep them for food, and we had beautiful friendships with them. But even like, we could have requested to ride on an animal like a horse, but we didn't. Do you know why? Because in Atlantis, we are all ultra marathon, super elite athletes. That if you want to, like, whatever, a horse can go 20 miles or 40 miles. You want to go 20 or 40 miles, be like, you do it. Be like, and you would run probably alongside of the horse. You'd be like, come on, let's run together. You would not jump on top of the back of another animal and be like, now I'm going to tell you where to go, and you're going to make me go 20 miles because I can't do it on my own. So none of that sense of like exploitation or the presumptiveness of the anthropocentric viewpoint that says, animals are here to serve us. And I know that that's a thing that's written about in human religious books like the Bible, that says God gave humans dominion over the animals. That's not the way that we looked at or interacted with animals in the animal world. So yeah, no, we had beautiful relationships and friendships, all in freedom. And every animal or human was sovereign, and meaning like they had their own boundaries and they were responsible for themselves. But and also you didn't have to have like a pet food store where you went out and bought kibbles, to take care of your animals. Like the animals connected to the sun, just as we connect to the sun. And the animals receive their divine mandates and creative directions. And also, if I go even deeper, even beyond the basic levels of respect and friendship, animals and plants made huge contributions to the artistic expressions that we engaged in our world. Because once you're beyond the survival drive, where you're like, I'm hungry, like empty ow in here. I'm pointing to my stomach if anyone's just catching the audio. Like the empty ow feeling that I had to learn about from being in these bodies here, like we never felt that way or feel that way in Atlantis. And animals didn't and don't feel that way either. And we're sustained by just basic energy that is available in the environment. So you have a lot of time. I don't want to say time on your hands, but you have like a lot of time and opportunity to simply exist. And there is a fine art to like simply existing. In this world, it's very overwhelmed with commodification and busyness, business, and having to always do something, because you got to earn money, because you got to get special pieces of paper, because you got to get to the food room and buy your food. But it's very, very different when you have all of your biological needs met and you are sustained. Sometimes we would just exist, and existing is an art form. We're just being. And then also sometimes we would create beautiful social sculptures of different organisms coming together, different levels of telepathic sharing. Sometimes we would create like verbalizations or sounds and music that you can hear, but sometimes it was an internal experience. And we would do that with animals. So it would not be weird at all if like a bunch of birds were singing in freedom around you, and you were like, and then you sang something, and then they sang something, and then another animal joined in with making some kind of a noise or some kind of a frequency or vibration. Like that is normal, and that's your day. And none of it is like playing Mozart that is written on musical paper. It's spontaneous in each moment. And of course, it is the respect that like birds are excellent musicians, or whatever. I'm trying to think of some animal that would be like a very good dancer or very beautiful with their movements. But, like something like dolphins that are frolicking in the waves, like they're very good at what they do. And there's this respect and admiration for their unique, their strengths and what they're able to do. And then there's also the uniqueness of your own form and what you're able to do. And then the harmonic, complementary nature of everybody expressing together.
Okay, so Aurora, you have said that you guys only eat light in Atlantis, and everyone, even the animals and plants, communicate with each other telepathically. So, did you have culture shock when you entered into this Earth realm? How did you cope and deal with the domestication of animals and eating meat and plants?
I'm laughing about culture shock because I had such a steep learning curve in coming here. Okay, so in my journey being a walk-in, I did not know that I was going to come into a body that had to eat physical objects. I thought presumptively that I'm going to come in here and it's going to be like my life is or was in Atlantis. And I thought, this is no problem. Like, I'm just going to eat light. And more accurately, we eat frequency, because we eat like light, but we also eat music, or the energy field that comes off of living things, all right, but not the things themselves. So in the first couple of weeks that I was here, and like the first few experiences of walking in this body, I did not comprehend at all how to take care of my body. And I joke about feeling the empty ow feeling here, kind of in my torso midsection, because I was like doing my sun gazing and eating light, and I didn't know why I felt empty and had even like kind of discomfort in my body. And I had to learn like, oh, you have to eat food. And I joke now about pointing to my mouth and saying like food goes in here. But I went through the very same levels of comprehension and acceptance that you guys all went through when you were a tiny newborn infant. When newborns first come here, first of all, you've developed and gestated in the womb, and you're used to just, I want to say like a life on a platter, you know, like you don't have to work hard in the womb at all. All of your needs are met through your bloodstream. So you're totally not prepared to have to chew up objects and put food in the mouth and have it come into the body. So babies, when they first come here, have to learn like how to suckle, how to latch on, how to get the breast milk, how to swallow, how to even the first inoculation of the digestive tract with beneficial microbes in the colostrum that they drink to be able to digest food. And that's also why babies have so much trouble like regurgitating. Like they know how to swallow, but they don't know how to keep everything inside. And when babies first have digestive upset, like gas or something like that, or diarrhea, they think it's the end of the world. They think like, I'm going to die, because that's why babies are crying. I'm not a parent. I don't know from firsthand experience, but I've done a lot of childcare and being a babysitter. So when babies, you talk about them being fussy, if they have gas or whatever, they're not fussy. They literally have no contextual reference point, and they feel pain inside of them, and they think they're going to die. They're like, I put an object in here and then I've had pain. I think I'm going to die. Like that's it. They don't know that this is just mild indigestion. So I had a lack of comprehension that I even had to eat physical food. And once I learned that, and I really learned that through television, which was my window of experience at that point in my journey, like pretty much for the first 18 months or so that I was here in the world, I had minimal social interaction, minimal conversations with other people. I really was not very verbal because I had had a lot of brain damage in the language centers of my brain. So I was not expressing myself very much with words, and also was not very I want to say good at language. I was not very like linguistically adept. You know, it's like speaking a foreign language. Like now I can have an easy back and forth with people. But back then, if someone said something to me, I would have to really think about it, process it, try to comprehend it, and then maybe several moments later be able to respond or say something back. So very much like a foreigner in a new world. And so I learned from watching television. I'm like, oh, like you have to get food. And then even so, the concept of food was very foreign to me. I know I had no idea what goes into the ingredients of food. All I knew, like a baby, food goes in here. I didn't know what's in food. And so I also initially didn't even comprehend, like, where does food come from? This is how, like, I don't even know, like from the foundation up, I did not know anything about what I was really getting into. Like, so first I had to find out about where food is. Food is in the food room. This is what you guys call the grocery store. But I had to learn, like, you can't just go into the food room and take what you want. You have to get special access to do that. And I learned all of this from observation. Nobody explained this to me. But you go, like in a foreign country, you watch. Like I just kind of would go places and watch and kind of learn from watching. And I learned like, oh, in order to access the food room, you need to have special pieces of paper. And if you don't have special pieces of paper, you cannot access the food. And I was also mind blown on that, because I was like, you have to eat physical objects, and all the physical objects are right there, but you're not allowed to just have them. You need to have magical paper in order to have them. But I'm like, okay, like just go with it. That's what it's, just go with it. We're just working in broad strokes here. So I came to accept that. But I also recognized, like, I remember the first time that I saw a homeless person. It was a guy that was sleeping across the sidewalk, and you literally had to kind of like walk over or past him in order to get to where you were going. And I remember observing this person and experiencing their energy field and recognizing what was going on with them. And I was like, this guy doesn't have magical pieces of paper, and he can't even access the food room. And that was a deep injustice that I felt. I was like my shoulders went down. I was like, that is so wrong. So I was already feeling like that this isn't right. And this isn't a little bit like not what I had signed up for. Okay. But in the beginning, all that I did was I ate for flavor. Like when you're a little tiny child and you're like, I like, like whatever, carrots and potato chips, like that's what is good. But that's not, you can't live on carrots and potato chips. So initially, even I did not know about food preparation, or I didn't even know how to like use a knife. That's the truth, guys. Like I would go to the bagel shop that was not far from, the home of the previous occupant, like her home when I walked into this body. It wasn't even my home at that point. But I would go to the small like shopping plaza, and there's like the pizza shop, the bagel shop, and a couple of other little things. And I learned that just like in a foreign country, I could go in there and I could kind of point to what I wanted, and they would prepare it for me. And then I didn't even know about denominations because I was numerically illiterate, that I had brain damage in my language centers and in my math centers. And so I couldn't even comprehend or recognize the symbols that are numerals in your world, much less the sense that like this piece of paper has a 10 on it. And when I give it to someone, then I will see like a 5 and 3 ones. Like I could not do math. I could not even comprehend on that level. So again, much like in the way that you might function in a foreign country, I could point to what I wanted, couldn't really say what I wanted, but I did know please and thank you. And then I would simply give them a magical piece of paper and then receive back some other magical pieces of paper. But I learned like, okay, like, I could ask for a bagel. They would use the knife. It's very hard. Like, think about when you were like a 3-year-old, you're like, you have to do this thing and it's hard. Like, and how do you coordinate? I was not very coordinated in my body. I did not know how to even use a knife. So yeah, I would ask for like someone else to prepare something for me. And so I ate like bagels and like pizza. Like I just ate what was, now I'm very health conscious and I do not live on bagels and pizza. But those were the things that were in my environment and they were available. And I simply like found nutrients and then placed them in here and then ingested them. And I had no idea about like how many nutrients you should eat during your day or what variety of nutrients. So once I found a thing that was, edible, I'd be like, oh yeah, we'll just get that thing because it's familiar and I know how to do it. So I would just repetitively get like the same thing. I didn't know like you have to vary your diet and do all these different things. That was a huge education. So that period that I just described to you, that was like 2001 when I first walked in until like 2003 or so, when I was really still figuring out what it is to have a body. I didn't know anything about personal hygiene either. It doesn't mean that I didn't like wash or clean myself, but it just means that like I didn't know that you're supposed to have different soaps for different areas of your body. I just got like one soap and I just used it on all of my body surfaces. And now we can laugh about that because like now I know like, no, like your hair, this requires different soap and your face requires different soap and your body requires different soap. And I didn't know any of those types of things. So I was really just painting in broad strokes. And again, I learned a lot of things just from either observing people kind of like standing on the sidelines and observing people in town or watching things on TV. And you can comprehend like from that, you don't get a complete education by just kind of like watching the world out of the side of your eye and having no one explain things to you. I had huge gaps in my education and was very erroneous and mistaken in a lot of my presumptions. And then I learned later, I was like, oh, I was doing this all wrong. You're actually supposed to do this. So I have a lot of funny Aurora stories about the things that I was doing wrong from the beginning and how I had to learn about all these different things. And then finally I did end up getting it together. And I've been here for over 20 years. So now I've got it together and I know what type of soaps to use on which body parts.
Well, men just use one, just like you did, and it works.
I can relate. I can very relate. And I'll offer this also. By the time I had integrated into society more and I had made more like friends and had more of a social network and community around me, I had more support of people like teaching me about things and telling me about things. I still mostly, and I was by that time working in small like entry-level jobs and, integrating in human society a lot more, but I still just bought prepared foods. And so like in my town, there was like a little, I'd call it like a home style deli. Like it was literally run by this Italian grandma and she treated me like a grandma. Like I go in there and I'd ask for like, I knew I could ask for like chicken parm and she'd wrap it up in aluminum foil and she'd be like, here you go, darling. Like I felt like I was getting food. I liked getting food from people. Like there's this real caringness, because that's what it's like in Atlantis. Like we are sustaining one another. And yeah, and then I would eat that food, but I had no idea. I had no cooking skills. I had no idea about what ingredients goes in or food preparation. And it wasn't until like 2006 or so when caring friends sent me a documentary about what was new in our food supply then. That's the genetically modified crops and the glyphosate that they were spraying on it. And that friend was sending this documentary around to everyone to warn us. And when I watched that, like my jaw hit the floor and I was like, this is wrong on every level. And it was mainly focusing on the GMO corn that was coming into our food supply at that point. And I was just like, that's it. Like, I'm not eating corn. And then I started to learn that corn syrup is made from corn. And then I started to learn that corn syrup is in almost everything, because then I started to go and read the ingredients that are on food products. And then I learned, like, I don't want to eat this. It has corn syrup in it. And then I learned corn syrup is in like salad dressings and bread and cookies and all these other things. And I stopped eating just the things that taste good here, because I just did what people did around me. And I thought, like, oh, like, this is what humans do. And this is how you take care of a human container. And after doing that for a couple of years, I learned, like, you cannot do what people do to their human containers around here, because a lot of it is very not good. Like coffee is one of the things that I had to learn. Like I drink decaf coffee now. But when I first got here, I was pretty much in entry-level jobs, surrounded by a lot of people. And I know I'm talking about me as a walk-in. I'm not talking about ancient Atlantis. I'm sorry, I got off track. But I'll just finish up talking about, because the contrasts. But no, we want to be in ancient Atlantis, not in like modern day New York State. And but whatever. People around me when I first got here, they would get to the gas station and they would buy their cigarettes for the day and also giant cups of coffee like this. And so I learned, like, oh, like this is what people do here. And I smoked cigarettes, I smoked tobacco and drank the giant cups of coffee like everyone else. And then I learned, like, you cannot do this. This is not okay, an okay way to treat your body. So I had to learn that, like, not every way that people are doing it here is correct. And then eventually I did learn in this world about what are proper food ingredients and what are recipes. And I learned from watching the Food Network, and I got an education about what is considered proper nutrition and what are the things that you should not eat. And that was when I had to do a lot of recalibrating, because I was like, oh, I can't just eat that all the time. I just can't eat that all the time. So it wasn't even because like my body's shape or composition wasn't optimum, but I just had to learn, like, you can't do that. It's not sustainable. And then I developed much better food habits by like 2008 or so. I had much better food habits. But no, I knew nothing about food. Sorry.
I love Aurora's stories. We need a different channel for all of the aspects of your life and
Yes,
experiences.
I
Um,
know.
okay, well, back to Atlantis, you were talking about how you had different language centers and how you didn't speak much in Atlantis and you guys were all telepathic. So what did that look and feel like? Because you weren't speaking English. Like, did you hear things or feel things in your body? Could you feel each other's emotions? What was that like?
That is an awesome question. We did not use the English language. Using verbal communication was considered extremely formal only for very special occasions, and would be considered comparable in this world to oratory, like giving a speech or an invocation, a ritual, or some kind of a song or performance. We would not choose to use our voices for something as small and simple as mundane as, like, pick up that thing and give it to me, or I need this thing over here. We would never do that, because we recognize our voices as being a primary center of creation and initiation in the world. And we would use that only as like the spark to initiate something very special, not for casual, communication and just sharing of energy on that way. So because when you speak, you vibrate the atmosphere, you make a physical sound compression vibration. And in our world in Atlantis, the whole world is so energetically sensitive that if you just say one little thing, you speak things into creation, basically. You say one little thing, it comes true. So we would not use our words in an errant way to talk about things that we don't want. We would never verbalize complaints. We would never do anything like that. And even like, let's say, whatever, you stub your toe and you want to have like a string of, whatever, explanations jumping out of your mouth, like, about how much your toe hurts or whatever. We wouldn't even do something like that, even though it was very rare for us to have an accident. But no, we would rarely, if ever, exclaim, with bad language. The way that, like here, like it's normal, like if you, whatever, drop your ice cream into, scream or cry or whatever. No, we didn't do anything like that. Now let me talk about our telepathy. Our telepathy is really more tele-empathy. I call myself a tele-empath because I am telepathic and empathic. So telepathic is mind-to-mind communication. Empathic is emotional sensing. And we did both of these things. So our telepathy is based 100% in love. None of it is based in synthetic telepathy. That means we don't use like walkie-talkies or implanted microchips or anything that is similar to telecommunications infrastructure in this world where there are like cell phone towers or wires that connected people. We were connected 100% on a bridge of love. And that is why we could talk to other animals, because we were connected, and plants, on a bridge of love to all of those animals. But what it looks like is a telepathic impulse is just a waveform that comes. And then when it comes inside of you, it hits your language filter, kind of like a drumstick hits a drum, and it vibrates your language filter. And then you interpret it through your biological structure. So the very, very same wave that comes here and hits my language filter as an embodied human gives me a human impression of information. But let's say it goes along and it hits a seahorse and their language filter and their interpretive filter for reality. The message would be translated into a formfulness that they could understand and comprehend. And so all of our group communication was sent out in the abstract form and then was personalized to each creature according to their biological worldview. And this is how you could find a common ground, because otherwise, trees speak about the things that are important to trees, and squirrels talk about the things that are important to squirrels. And there's only a small area of overlap where these two worlds are both where they have commonalities, because also these two creatures have very, very different worldviews and different biologies and different imperatives of what they're doing with their presence in the world. So finding that common ground was always challenging. In our human interactions, even on the level of mind communication, and I'll get to empathy too, it wasn't just a total open book, but it's the truth that in that level of psychic presence, you can read anyone like an open book. So that's why we didn't have lies, because it was considered to be a ridiculous absurdity. It would be like if I said to you right now, I am wearing a blue dress, and you would be like, stop it, Aurora, that's very silly. You're clearly wearing a predominantly red dress, with small amounts of purple and orange. I can see it with my eyes. So if I said, if I just ate cookies for breakfast, I'm confessing to you, but they're healthy cookies. But if I said to you, I did not just eat cookies for breakfast, you would be like, Aurora, don't lie. I can see, not just see them in my tummy, but I can see your timelines. I can see everything you've ever done. And I can see that you ate cookies this morning. So it would be considered absurd and also unnecessary. We lived in a very loving community. You didn't have to hide something. So you didn't have to hide your shame cookies of your breakfast in the morning, because everyone would be like, hooray, you ate cookies. It wouldn't be about what you ate, but they would be like, hooray, you don't have to hide that. We love and celebrate who you are. But even in that level of supportive society, you still get to have privacy. And this is important to comprehend in comparison to this world where we presently are, where there is a very invasive technological surveillance state that looks at your thoughts and reads your mind whether you want it or not. In the world that we lived in, we could read each other's mind, but we held back. out of a sense of decency and appropriate or correctness of respecting other people. So the way that I describe this is like here in my home in this world, I live in an apartment building, right? And I have different levels of personal privacy. Like there's the sidewalk that is out way at the edge of the property, and that is public. And if I'm on the sidewalk, anybody can be walking on the sidewalk. I can be walking on the sidewalk. And if I'm walking on the sidewalk, that would be considered like anybody could come up to me, anybody could talk to me. And also I must be dressed appropriately for communicating with people and being in public, you know, in the sidewalk. But then there's a little entryway, and then there's an inner courtyard. And the inner courtyard is not for anybody in the community. It is only for people that live in my apartment building. That's our courtyard specific to this building. But anybody who lives in this building can be in the courtyard. It's public space for this building. So you should still be dressed somewhat appropriately for being, you know, viewed or interacting with other human beings, right? Then you have like my particular front door. That is unique to me. That is a public space outside of my front door, but it's not okay for someone else who wanted to come by and whatever, put a potted plant, their potted plant in front of my front door. I would say, no, like put that in front of your own front door. Like this is my entryway over here. Then even in my house, and you have to now ask for special permission to come inside of my private home. That's the key point in terms of consent and telepathy, as I'm using this analogy. You guys are all getting it. You don't need a special invitation to come into the courtyard, although it is made for the occupants of this home. Like delivery men come into the courtyard, the postman comes into the courtyard. So it's not like it's only for people that are residents here. But to come into my front door and come into my private home, you need an invitation. And this is the key thing. So in Atlantis, we have some aspects of our consciousness and of our being that are the equivalent of the public sidewalk or the public courtyard, like levels of either information or emotional sharing that we make publicly available. But then there are deeper layers that are not publicly available, and you need to ask politely or have an invitation to access those layers of being and those levels of intimacy. So in order to come inside of my house, which is my private space in the world, you need to knock on my front door, and then I need to actually say, please come in. If you don't knock, or if you just barge on in, that's considered illegal. That's violation. And same thing with someone's mind. Like you can't just barge right into their mind and be like, hi, like my name is Joe Schmo and I want to talk to you in your mind now. We'd be like, I would make that face. I would make a very distressed face. And then I'd say, who the F are you? Get the F out. You're not supposed to be here. Like it's like a burglar jumping into your mind. It's not okay. And then even in my house, I have different levels of privacy. This, where I'm currently talking on my computer, this is like my living room. And you can see like I have my painting area over there, and I have my computer, and I have my music stuff, and I have a little couch. And if guests come into my home, I'm gonna come into my home, sit down on my couch. Like this is the public space of my house. But I don't invite everyone into my bedroom. That's what the room is over there. That is a private space in my house. And it would be hugely presumptive if I invited a guest in and I'm like, yeah, you can be here in my living room, but like, you can't go into my bedroom. If someone went into there, I'd be like, that's not okay. That's a violation, because the bedroom is another layer of privacy, and private activities happen there. And also private objects are stored there, you know, like whatever, like your bras and your underwear, like that is not here in the living room. That is not for everyone to look at. And I definitely do not store my bras and my underwears outside on the public sidewalk. You guys would think I was insane if I would do that, right? Like, so now you're starting to get it. And then you also, in that room, there's the bathroom, the ultimate place of privacy in a house. That it doesn't matter who you are, like you don't come into my bathroom. That's where you do the privatest things that you need to do as a person. So in telepathic sharing in a telepathic society, everybody has their own inner private space that is really more analogous to a journal, where you think your most deeply held thoughts and feel your most deeply held feelings. Everybody needs private times. Sometimes maybe you have overeaten or some spicy foods or whatever, and you need to be in the bathroom. You need to release that stuff. You know what I mean? Like it needs to poop out. Maybe you had an interaction with someone that was the equivalent of eating spicy food that like really riled up your emotions, and you need to process it. Doesn't have to be done publicly. This is the big thing. In a telepathic society, it doesn't mean you get along with everyone. It doesn't mean that you're total best friends. I joke about that. Being, like lovey huggy friends with everyone. You might have a conflict with someone else. But if you have a conflict with them, it doesn't mean that they need to know about it, or that the dirty, whatever, I want to say dirty laundry. You don't have to broadcast it all over the entire telepathic society. You have your own private space inside of you, that where you can journal, where you can write or say anything without fear of repercussions, because sometimes you have to process stuff out, just like you process stuff with your digestive tract, and then release it. And then you flush the toilet and it's done and it's gone. And not everybody in the whole world needs to know about it, because sometimes it just passes through you and then it's no longer relevant. So we were very respectful of one another in the private realms that we would keep, because it's recognized that someone might think something about you, like Lanley, maybe you might have your own private mind where you need to think thoughts about me. And it's not right for me to be watching you do this, because maybe I did something that made you feel angry. Maybe you were like, Aurora was wearing that mostly red dress today, and it just made me feel so angry, and I couldn't stand it. And then you process it and it's over. But I don't necessarily need to know about it, because the truth is, I was just being me. I was just living my life. And it's totally acceptable that you had a conflict with me. Of course, we're not in conflict. I'm just being silly. But you're entitled to your feelings, is what I'm trying to say. So it's not like some kind of a surveillance totalitarian state where it's like if you wrong think, like 1984, if you do the wrong think or wrong speak, that you will be punished. And then the other level of that is empathy. Empathy, because it's telepathy is intellectual information, but it is non-verbal. So it's not a speaking in your mind, but it is a deep knowing. But empathy is different, and it is emotional energy, and it's feeling. And everyone in this world where we are talking on the computer probably already recognizes some level of emotional intellect or sensory sensitivity. Like if you've ever walked into a room where you can feel that there's tension, like people have just been arguing, and you say like, there's tension in the air, that's emotional energy. That's what an empath does. You sense emotional energy. Or like if you walk into a party and you feel like everybody's having a great time and the vibes feel cool, that is also empathy. You're exhibiting emotional intelligence. It's a feeling state. So along with our telepathic broadcasts, we would also broadcast emotional truth. And that's another layer to the truthfulness of the communication, because, what I intellectually or analytically feel and express is, I hesitate to say feel, but know and express is different than what I feel. Because sometimes, like, let's say, again, I use the analogy of my dress. Sometimes my dress just makes you feel a certain way. And it's not always connected to me, because you might look at my dress and be like, I feel angry, because maybe it reminds you of something else or someone else or something bad that happened to you in another time. Like, you're allowed to feel that. But then we have a lot of control over our emotions. We did not wildly lash out or randomly project. So we had to have maintain a focus of our emotional expression. So that means like I can tune in on you emotionally, and I can feel how you feel. Like if I walked up to you wearing this dress and I felt like negative stink vibes coming off of you, then it'd be like, oh, like Lanley really doesn't like this dress. But I wouldn't stop being me. But what I would probably do in ancient concurrent Atlantis, I'd probably just walk away. She'd probably just be like, for whatever reason, this dress is really riling her up. I think I'm just going to go over there, because mostly we were not about like war and conflict and things like that. But all of this to say, it is a respect of mutual personal boundaries. My boundaries for personal self-expression are respected, and your boundaries for having an emotional reaction are respected. It's not like everything was placid or boring. There was a huge variety of emotion and response to one another, but we respected each other's journey, didn't take it personally, and self-organized. into patterns that were very comfortable and sustainable, which is different than like in this world here, where oftentimes you either live with or work with people that agitate you or that you agitate them, but you have to deal with them. I had a neighbor here in the apartment complex where I live right now that was not loving my vibe. I didn't do anything bad to him. He's just not loving my vibe. Like he would look at my dress and just not like it. And so in ancient concurrent Atlantis, it would be like, no problem, because we didn't have personal property. And, like have only one house to live in. Like you could go wherever you wanted to go. If someone wasn't loving your vibe, there was a huge amount of fluidity in where you can go. But in the world that you guys are most familiar with here, like you work at your job, you're at a company, and if you don't like your coworker, like you have to effing deal with it because they are there. And so in this world, you get a lot more of that type of frisson or agitation from having to be around people that you're not really on this comfortable frequency with than in Atlantis, where our light bodies are fully awakened. Our senses of our light bodies are fully sensitized. That means you can feel frequency, and we are not required to be in each other's presence. And so actually some people in ancient concurrent Atlantis would choose a very solitary life. Some people or some organisms or animals, creatures, would be like, you know something, I don't like the way I feel amidst all of this. I'm going to go over here and just feel my own experience and not interact. That is a totally valid experience in the world. So you got to, and maybe they would only want to interact with someone once every 10 years. Like, I'm bored. It's my 10-year anniversary, time for me to go talk to someone, but it was not required. So just, and there were also, to complement, some people that wanted to always be in community, the ultimate extroverts, those who only felt happy and good when they were surrounded by their social circle of other people, plants, and animals that they were always sharing with and always talking with and always chatting with, and that they wouldn't feel right or good if they were in a sense of isolation. And all of that and everything in between was all respected as part of the journey of consciousness as it is individualized, in an individual container and learning about itself. Because there's such a array of uniqueness in all of these creatures. We didn't expect everyone to act the same way, and the differences were celebrated and respected.
Thank you. So many questions from this. First of all, you are speaking of everyone having individuated containers and being able to feel someone else's feelings as opposed to your own, and even individuate between thoughts. What do you think is keeping us from having that here? I know you just said you guys had awakened light bodies and everything as well. Does that have anything to do with it? Because what if I'm walking into a room and I feel angry, and I'm saying, what's wrong with me? And I take a bunch of medication so I don't feel angry, but really I'm feeling someone else's anger. What is keeping us from having those discernment abilities?
I love this question. The very first thing at the foundation is unhealthy genetic modifications that were done to this world non-consensually. It is remembered in the mythology of your current world as the Tower of Babel, which is the Bible story about humanity living as one and sharing a common language, building a tower that threatened God, but this is not real God. This is like lowercase demiurge God. And the lowercase demiurge God was not liking this effrontery, knocked down the tower, and then made everyone have individuated language throughout their different communities. So created confusion and the lack of verbal communication. That is a direct allegory for what happened at the impending dissolution of our Atlantis civilization and the inception of our experience as mortals in this layer of reality. As I talked about that, concept of shells, concurrent time shells of reality in the first conversation that we had. But that's one of the first things that happened. Like, we were taken from being light eaters and turned into physical object eaters. And we were also genetically modified away from the capacity to fully sense and feel others into this type of barrier where we can't feel and sense others. And then after that, there are many other limitations and blockages that have been placed into humanity. But the journey that we're talking about in reawakening the light body and then creating a new updated version of Atlantis, which we're jokingly calling Atlantis 2.0, has everything to do with reclaiming these abilities. So it has to do with reawakening basically the pineal gland, which is one of the centers of psychic ability in the body, but really the entire light body. And when I talk about the light body, there are areas of overlap in my definitions with your biological form. So your pineal gland is one of them. Other physical structures in your body that represent your light body are like your retinas, your optic nerve, your neurology, all of your nerves through your body, your mitochondria, aspects of your lymph system, your skin, as it responds to light, when you get tan, when you go outside, even your digestive tract is part of your light body. And a lot of, in the body form that you're presently in, a lot of it is the original architecture that has then been repurposed or distorted to be able to respond to this very distorted world that we find ourselves in. But the reawakening of the light body is basically a return to energetic sensitivity and frequency sensitivity, and not just merely taking the surface level interpretation of reality, which is what materialism is. So to get back to being purely telepathic, we need to do a total body overhaul of our physicality structure to become energetically sensitive again. And then also in the insensate levels of materialism that we have occupied, humans have used technology to compensate and to do all the things that you should be able to do with just your regular body. And at this point, those technologies directly inhibit our natural telepathy, all right? So when you think about technology, it used to be something like, if I wanted to talk to someone far away, whatever, 2,000 years ago, I would write them a letter or a scroll or a cuneiform or whatever, and then someone would physically carry it to them, right? But that didn't inhibit my ability to be telepathic. But then when they started to invent things that required electricity, like the telegraph, beep, 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 and it makes the little signals that go across telegraph wires. This is like the end of the 1800s. That's when it started to really inhibit human telepathy, because it was the wires that are stretched across the landscape that are antithetical to Earth's natural energy patterns. It's not like, it's like bad feng shui for the planet, but that's not even the way. It's like bad acupuncture for the planet, that it broke those energy lines instead of making them healthy. And then also bringing electricity into the human home, where people in the end of the 1800s went from gaslight to electrical wiring in their houses. And the wires in the house create an antithesis force field that prevents people's energy body from being sensitive to frequencies. And that was whatever in the early 1900s. As technology evolved and there were more frequencies that were broadcast into the atmosphere through radio and then television, that started to reduce telepathy more and more. And then I will tell you that in this world, when they started to do the wireless phones, and that's just about the time that I walked in as Aurora in the early 2000s, there was a huge diminishment of natural telepathy, because it's not just that you have the convenience of being able to call someone on the phone. Like my own example is when I lived in upstate New York, when I first walked in here as Aurora, we didn't have cell phones, just regular phones that attached to the wall. And when I needed to find a friend around town, you couldn't call them, but you could call them with your mind. And so you might be kind of like this, be like, okay, like, where's my friend? And kind of sense with your mind, like, are they over there? No, maybe they're over there. Like, are they at that store? Maybe they're at the cafe. Maybe they're at the swimming hole. And you kind of use your mind's eye to sense on these things. And I used to have the most magical synchronistic days where I would be like, oh, maybe my friend is over there. I'll go check it out. And I don't meet my friend, but instead I meet someone else. And then our adventure bounces over to here. And then eventually I end up finding my friend, after many, many adventures. That's what our life is like in Atlantis. We are telepathic and we are synchronistically guided from event to event or moment to moment by higher divine connection. And in this world that you're in right now, that synchronicity has been cut short because of not just the convenience of the cell phone telecommunications network, but because of its inhibition of your light body to be directly divinely guided. And then now we're in a world that is completely blanketed by this anti-telepathic frequency, and that almost everyone is directly guided by the impulses of their phones, not by their own mind. So it used to be, and now people are like, how old are you, lady? Like, like in my day, well, it used to be like, if you didn't know where you're going, right? Before you have GPS on your phone, you're like, okay, I don't know where in the world I'm going. I'm just gonna drive on my intuition, follow the signs and follow my guts and see if I can find a place. And everyone who's like younger than 20 years old, they're like, you're crazy. Nobody does that. But we used to do that. Sometimes we used to have a physical map to be able to find places. But no, seriously, I'm not that old. But anyway, yeah, no, we used to just be guided by our inner vision. And that's kind of like how birds do migration. And sometimes you get lost, but then you ask for directions and you end up finding your way. But in this world that we're in right now, everyone is used to GPS pinpointing exactly where you need to go and giving you direct step-by-step guidance. So it is making the muscle for telepathy to go limp and to atrophy because people aren't using that intuitional muscle, and everything is guided by the phone. And when you're in a place where there's no GPS, sometimes people feel very bereft and hopeless because they're like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't have a signal. It's like you have a divine signal that you should be learning how to tune in on, but you just haven't had the opportunity. So think about it in those terms. If you're ever in a very rural area and you're like, oh no, my map isn't working. Be like, we were connected to the planet. So when we in Atlantis, like we knew exactly where we were going. We were divinely guided by higher self. We could see the future. And also we were totally connected to the planet. So we would not be like, oh, I think I'll go for like a nice 20-mile jog today. And then all of a sudden be like, oh no, like I'm lost. I don't know where I am. Like, you know exactly where you are. And you're on the planet, and the planet also talks to you and guides you. So this sense of like, being afraid, being lost in the wilderness, or, any kind of thing like that was not a concern for us. And also you weren't going to die of thirst, hunger, or exposure. It was not a concern. But just please know that when you're connected to the planet, you have a sense of being directed and a sense of belonging. Like you're like, I'm supposed to be here. I'm in exactly the right place where I'm supposed to be. And not this sense of what most people feel in this world that I would define as ungrounded, where people do not have a connection to the planet. And they don't even feel like they're in a real reality. A lot of people here feel like they're in a simulation or an artificial reality. And they definitely aren't feeling the sense of the planet talking to them, because mostly if you guys heard the planet talking to you today, the planet would say like, get the F out, not off of the planet, but like, don't live in a city. Like you can't hear the planet because you live in a city. And then if you could hear the planet would say like, where you're living is not good. Like change your life, don't live, because the cities are generally chaotic hellholes. I'm sorry that I'm generalizing that, but you know what I mean. I apologize to people who live in cities because they're like, hey, stop calling my neighborhood a chaotic hellhole. But you know what I'm talking about, because you can tell that a more neutral way of saying it is that most urban areas in the current culture, in this world with computers, are not consciously designed, and they are containers that are antithetical to your light body, that they are chaotic frequency structures that cause greater levels of disease and decrepitude. And because it's all of these frequencies that are going through people at wrong shapes. And when you are in a correctly shaped environment, the shapes of the energy come through you and they don't corrode you. They lift you up and they make you feel better. And in this world that you're in, there are very few environments that are like that. But in ancient concurrent Atlantis, our whole world was or is that. that every place that you walk, the energy is manicured and curated to feel so good that it makes you feel young, healthy, and vital just to be in that experience. And that's what I try to approximate here in my home. Like, I know you can only see the lighting a little bit. I have all of these wonderful paintings and sculptures all around my living space here. I have created a positive energy environment in my little square footage here in my zone where I live that is good energy, that is uplifting to my body. And I feel such a difference when I exit my home where the art and music and energy feels manicured and great. And when I go to a nearby city, like if I have to get the oil changed on my car, I'm like, okay, get ready. It's going to be 4 hours of, whatever. It's like the seething cauldron of hell. Like it's just like, it's a regular city. It's not that bad. But going to Jiffy Lube and getting the oil changed, because there's all of this crazy chaotic energy. And it makes me feel like I'm in like a washing machine or a maelstrom or whatever. Like you're getting all twisted, all turned around. You're like, okay, just maintain your boundaries, maintain your boundaries. And then when the oil change is done, I'm like, get me out of here. I get back to my nice small town that I live in and my nice happy force field of my home. And then I'm like, oh, that's so much better. So I'm sure that people are listening can relate. I'm sure they're like, yeah, or like we do know that these cities are chaotic. The energy is not that good, and it is the origin of aging, really. The chronological decrepitude is really from being exposed to these non-supportive energy assaults in the environment.
Thank you. I will confirm that when you're out in the wilderness, you'll do things that you won't even know why you did it, and somehow you're still alive, and you're like, wow, something's watching over us. And you don't get those chances in the city because we're just so protected and safe all the time.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a type of safety, but it's also a corrosive safety. So it might prevent you from falling off a cliff or drowning in a raging river, but it also prevents you from being able to talk directly to a bumblebee or to sense what a plant is just from being next to it and learn from it in that way. So it's like being a domesticated animal. Like you trade safety for there's a thing that you miss, and the thing that you miss is having real direct experience and knowledge.
Yeah, it's definitely a numbing safe. I agree. Okay, another question about the mind. So you said everyone was self-contained in their thoughts and just had the ability to have different levels of what they shared. Um, you also mentioned in the last interview that you have the job of holding everyone's mind. So is that kind of like a government in Atlantis, or what is that? Is that a position? Like, what is that kind of relationship?
It is like a government, but I have to make a distinction. It's a beautiful question. I love it. That's why I smiled so much. In this world where we're talking on a computer, the government is seen as an external authority organization that sometimes does not coincide with the value system or desires of its constituents, the people that it rules over. And government literally means mind control. Like something is like grasping onto you and like making you think a certain way and violently jerking you over here and then violently pushing you over here and making you do those things. And I mean, a lot of people in this world criticize government as saying that taxation is theft, or that it is a taxation as a violation of personal rights and personal sovereignty. And I think that these are very worthy conversations in the world of power abuse that you presently struggle in. But in ancient concurrent Atlantis, leadership is completely different because none of it is done out of bullying and fear and intimidation. Like if you guys don't pay your taxes in the present world in the United States, the government comes after you. They're like, give me my money or else I'm going to put you in jail. Like they are ready to do different levels of violence for coercion. But in ancient concurrent Atlantis, We did not have to coerce one another in terms of leadership. It was much more the sense of the strongest, most muscular mind is, of course, the one who should be performing this job that is about leadership and group cohesion, taking responsibility for what's happening on the entire planet. So in Atlantis, every organism and creature is individual, and every organism and creature is sovereign. That's like saying in the band, in the symphony, all of the musicians are in charge of their own music. And if you play, well, you have a piano right behind you on the screen there. So we'll say your job is being the piano player, and you know how to play the piano the best. Like, I'm playing the flute. I'm not going to tell you how to do your job as the piano player. You know exactly how to do it. But our band or our symphony does need leadership and coordination. Something like saying, like, okay, we're going to start the music now. Get ready and go. Or something like, okay, everybody, we're going to play in the key of G, so that we're all starting together and we're on the same page and we're going to coordinate this. That is the level of leadership that I was able to do. And it is and was a service to my community. So in this world of corruption, people join government for purposes of power abuse. People often gravitate to leadership so that they can be powerful over others for just the gratification of feeling powerful over others. But in ancient Atlantis or concurrent Atlantis, one naturally rises to the position of leadership through the desire to effectively serve the entirety of community, plants, animals, and minerals, and humans, and the planet herself, and through being the most qualified person for the position. So in like modern times right now, like if the job was like smashing into people, would you choose either like a linebacker, like a football player, or would you choose a ballerina? And you'd be like, well, for the job of smashing into people, I would choose the football player because their size and shape of their body is literally built for that activity. But if I said the job is leaping gracefully, who should be hired? You'd be like, duh, the ballerina, because they're small and svelte, and they can leap and do things gracefully. All right. It's exactly the same way in Atlantis. Your mind shape is as visible to someone else as your body shape. Some people are built like a linebacker. Some people are built like a ballerina. A direct speaking, not allegorical here, is to say that your mind and your pineal gland is kind of like a garden hose that can have different levels of focus. Like on my garden hose, there's a little nozzle, and I can either make it a very directed beam, and I can use that to maybe wash off the sidewalk if there's some muddy footprints, like power washing, right? But if I use that focused beam on some delicate flowers, they would be like crushed. They'd be all squished down by the force of the water. So I can also make my garden hose have a beautiful, wide, delicate spray, and then I can just lightly sprinkle my flowers so that they don't get all crushed down. The ability to speak telepathically is very similar. You can have narrow speak, which is when you only talk to one person or one organism. And that organism can be here in your presence, like at same time, place, coordinates, or can be in the distant past or the distant future. You can have, so you can have narrow speak, you can have near speak, and you can have far speak. So near speak can be maybe you're only 1 foot away from me, or near speak can be you are here in the same time that I live in. But far speak can be maybe I want to talk to you and you're hundreds of miles away from me, or maybe you are hundreds of years away from me. Then there can be wide speak, which is like a big giant spray. That's if I want to talk to hundreds of people, or maybe even thousands of people at the same time. And you can talk to thousands of people at the same time who are either in your presence, like in the same room as you, or who are scattered all throughout the entire world, or who are long ago in the deep past, or who are future people who don't even exist yet. And my architecture of my mind in Atlantis and here is built to be able to accommodate talking to many, many people at one time And that can be people that are either in deep antiquity or the far future. And I can also, of course, narrow it down and just talk to one person, if I wanted to have a private conversation. But my role was in being like the conductor or the coordinator of all of these different musicians in the band. So I was able to mentally be the epicenter of the communications that are going on with all of these creatures, not only humans, but also plants and animals, coordinating the entirety of what is happening on the planet. That is the level of leadership. And it doesn't mean that like, I don't know anything about someone else's job. Like I wouldn't presume to tell you how to play the piano, but I do know whether a note is a right note, So I would be able to tell, well, like you're not playing the right note. Like this is actually supposed to be this over here. So expect for you in your own expertise, but also the conductor of the whole symphony has to know everybody's part. I had to know everybody, like I had to know what the birds are supposed to do, and I had to know what the trees are supposed to do, and I had to know what the humans are supposed to do, so that I could tell whether they were doing the right thing. And then if they're not doing the right thing, to get everybody coordinated and get them on board. But this is very, very different than the government that you're used to, where it's like pay your taxes or else, like you get a punch in the face. Like I would not do that to the people that I serve in that realm. Everything was done through love. So it's like if you ever had a really wonderful music teacher that you were maybe playing band in high school band or something like that, and you're like, I love my music teacher. Like you want to play the best you can because you want to please your teacher. And your teacher is also super cool to you. And it's like, technically you played a wrong note there. Please fix it next time. Right. And that's how it was for us working together. Everyone in the world loved me or loves me as the coordinator of this larger group, effort that we're making. And they're like, yeah, we all want to do the right thing for each other and please Aurora. And I'm like, so they're voluntarily wanting to coordinate and do this work. And I'm like, I want to do the best job coordinating everyone that I can because it's a big responsibility and because I'm built for it. So let's say if there's a person that only has the ability to hold 3 minds with their mind, they can't hold millions of minds with their mind. That's still an amazing person, and they should be given a job to hold 3 minds in conversation. And it's like having smaller, more slender muscles. You know what I mean? Like it's not being a football player with big, giant muscles. So we respect the unique architecture of each person. It's not like, well, 3 is always going to be inferior to 1 million, and you're always going to be at the lower end of appreciation. No, like if you can do 3, that's great. If you can do 1 million, that's great. And it's really a question of optimizing personnel. Like if you're in a business in this world, you want to optimize your personnel. Like some people are great at taking phone calls. Some people are much, much better at like drawing things on an architecture's blueprint board, and they should not be taking phone calls. Like everybody should do the thing that they are really the best at. And that is a lot of the levels of my leadership and community building was about organizing our activities so that people or individuals, I should say, individuals are each in the position where they can express and explore their greatness. That's what real leadership is, I think, in this world here as well. Leadership in this world, though, it gets all caught up in ego dynamics and commodification and competition and comparison. But in this world here, if you're really a good leader, either in like sports or having a business or any kind of social group, great leaders allow people to self-organize to bring themselves to their greatness. So that's like saying like, you're good at answering phones. And you're like, I like answering phones. I'm like, good, you're our phone answerer. So leadership is not just being like, I'm in charge and you're doing it because I say. It's like saying like, I respect your individuality and where can you make the best contribution? And then also, because we didn't have money or we don't have money in ancient concurrent Atlantis. So it's not a question of who's getting paid more, because a lot of times people will be like, well, if you only talk to 3 people, then you can have $3. But this person talks to 1 million people, so they can have $1 million. But we didn't have money we don't use money, but we do have forms of respect and having energy flow to excellence, but it's not a competition and everybody has everything that they need. So if you talk to 3 people, you are rewarded. And if you talk to 1,000,000 people, you are rewarded. And everybody gets the recognition for their contribution. But it's not like someone says like, this is me being like very like pumped up. He's like, I did 1,000,000 and I'm 1,000,000 times better than you. Like, I would never do that. I would be like, I did 1,000,000. And everyone would be like, hooray, you did 1,000,000. And someone else would be like, I did 3. And we'd all be like, hooray, you did 3. And there is not a comparison, because I'm telling you, like, I told you how I came into this world and I saw somebody sleeping on the sidewalk and they don't even have enough magical pieces of paper to go to the food room. And then I also learned some people don't just have one house, they have many houses. And they don't just have enough money to go to the food room, they have enough money to buy a lot of cars and all these huge iniquities in this world, but we didn't have those same iniquities in resources and access to basic resources, or even access to rewards and celebratory resources in that world. And so I was very celebrated. I'm happy to say I was very respected, or am very respected and very celebrated by my community for the contributions that I make. And then how I ascended and evolved into the waveform Aurora presence is directly related to that I was doing I don't have a word for it, but like holding people's minds or being in a rapport with people's minds over the entirety of the planet and coordinating activities over the entirety of the planet. And then in my ascension, I then was part of the floating collective that doesn't stand on the planet, but is still connected to the sun. And I then coalesced a group of consciousnesses around me in that position. And that was like the next step of evolution of like what it is to, I would call it carrying, to carry minds. And carrying can be like inspiring and protecting and coordinating or organizing those minds and their activities. And I learned how to carry minds at that level of the floating collective. And then I eventually learned how to carry a group of minds even untethered from the security of the planet and this particular star, but across vast distances of time and space. And that's been my existence pretty much previous to walking in here into this, body, food goes in here type of body, that I was helping a large collective of consciousness to coordinate all of these different actions that we did and do in terms of rectifying time, so healing things that are out of balance, diminishing what would be considered disease, like non-ideal situations and circumstances on the larger galactic scale, and inspiring cultures through art and beauty and music and dance. And so I pretty much just took the same how do I say formula, same basics of what I was doing in Atlantis, and translated it to the level of the network of the stars, where I'm still coordinating minds, bringing people to their greatness. We always worked with a purpose and with a passion, I should say, and also sometimes to explore. So I have to say that too, like my role that I play, and not play, but that I perform for people in all these different circumstances. It's never arbitrary or just whimsical, just kind of feel like it. It's always really purposeful, guided by highest intelligence for the sustenance of all life everywhere. So we had very clear directives, because it's nice to just make music and we just like to jam and have fun and things like that. But we did things for a very focused directive, and our goal was always about uplift and continued life and healing and making things better, and basically continuing to sustain and generate life in the world. And same thing with the larger projects that I do on the level of the sun and the star system.
Sounds like you've had many cosmic promotions.
It
That's amazing.
did.
You had
Yeah.
mentioned you had mentioned that it takes a bridge of love to be able to communicate in that way. So when you were finding out that we weren't as telepathic as you thought we were when you came in as a walk-in, was that because of the limitations of your own body or the limitations of the recipient's bridge of love being not developed? And
The
how would we
recipient.
develop that? Is it even possible?
It is possible. Such a beautiful question. It's because the recipient was not able to receive. And some of it is because I would say their hardware, it needs to be upgraded, like their actual brain structure needs to be fixed. Some of it is because of their software or their idea patterns held within their brain structure needs to be fixed. Some of it, I also said, is just getting away from this technology that reduces our natural telepathy. But in the first few years that I was here as Aurora in this world, I learned that there is a wild spectrum of, some people have telepathy, some people have zero telepathy. So just, I know, because I'm trying to focus on Atlantis, but I have more Aurora stories from this world. So I did some entry level work. I know I worked in a retail art store and I did a lot of custom framing after I, like increased my skills and learned how to do things and increased my math skills. And so that was when I was trying to experiment with using my telepathy with my human customers, because people would come in and they wanted a picture to be framed. And I would say, like, well, do you want it like this, or like this? And I would beam pictures to their mind. And then I started to learn after a couple of experiences, like, I don't think people are actually getting these pictures that I'm beaming into their minds. And then I learned, like, I needed to get physical examples, like this is a black frame and this is a gold frame and this is, like a red frame. Which one of these do you like the most? So I had to learn basically that not everybody receives these mind pictures. But in that same, so most of my framing customers, I would say dead spark plugs, like nothing going on up here, really just receiving the words from my verbal mouth. But at that same job, I was working with my boss to put up some shelving. And my boss was saying, well, you got to do it like this, like this. And I didn't say it with my words, but I said it with my mind. And he wasn't doing it right. And I did recognize the power dynamic in this world. Like, you don't tell your boss what to do. So in my mind, I told him what to do. I was like, with my mind, I was like, well, you have to make this go like this. And this is like this. And he looked at me and he was like, I heard that. He was like, and he said to me, you're a loud thinker. And I was like, ooh, like this guy is telepathic and he could hear my loud thoughts. And I laughed it off. And I was like, because I wasn't necessarily like as overt about being a walk-in. Then I was like, oh yes, I am. Because also I didn't want to lose my job. I knew it was very disrespectful to tell your boss what to do. So I kind of laughed it off. But that was one of the few people that I met that confirmed that they could hear my thought structures. And also another person later on, a couple of years subsequent to that, I was actually built the art tables that I still have here in my studio. They've traveled with me across many, many moves, but I was collaborating with them. I got some found lumber and I was working with the guy that I knew who's this local carpenter, and he totally looks like an extraterrestrial. Like, if I just described him, he looks like a very, very tall, slender person with like a triangle shaped head and giant almond shaped eyes. Okay, he looks like an extraterrestrial. And we're working together on this project to build these tables. And we were both totally telepathic with one another. We did not speak with our words, but we were just putting our things together and coordinating so perfectly. And we laughed too, because we know each other from like a large or galactic context. We're like, this is so quaint. Like, if you want to make tables here, you have to actually pick things up with your hands, because we're used to like when you can levitate things. Oh, did I not mention that? We can levitate things in Atlantis. So we're like, this is so funny. Like, we can't just levitate things. We actually have to use like a power drill to make this happen. We're like laughing about it. But yeah, that was like the easiest job because we didn't have to hide from each other. We're both totally to like whatever supernatural presence is in the world. And we were able to coordinate our minds very effectively. So that project just came together, boom, 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 in the easiest way with no power struggles, power dynamics, or difficulties. And that was a pure joy to be able to collaborate on that level. There aren't that many people that are here. So the real answer is genetically, or on a soul level. Some people are here are very advanced, like my friend who helped me build the tables. And he came here with that. In spite, like everybody lives in the same environment, everybody has the same cell phone crapola in their neighborhoods, but he was able to coordinate with me very well. And he's also a very self-aware extraterrestrial type of person in the world. My boss was what you'd call a mundane person. Like he was not particularly spiritually elevated or spiritually aware, but he had enough telepathic presence to be able to hear when I was speaking loudly with my mind, but he didn't have enough telepathic presence to be able to articulate back. So he could receive, but not really send. And then there were the people that were in the environment that couldn't receive and couldn't send. And I actually think that a lot of this has to do with genetic stuff. Limitations that are inborn genetically. Now, before people say like, well, that's it, I'm jumping out a window. If I don't have it, it's a genetic quality. And if I don't have it, I ain't going to get it, right? But I want you to know that this is not a genetic quality. Like, I have brown eyes. And if, I clearly do not have blue eyes. It's like, if I need to have blue eyes, like, it ain't going to happen, kid. Like, this is the color this is what you think. Like, this is genetically, you're just shaped like this. But in terms of consciousness, the way that your genetics are shaped or behave and how that affects your ability to use your mind, there you have a lot more fluidity. You have a lot more latitude than you do in terms of like your physical expression and your protein structures of your body. So you can grow and evolve. Basically, humans call it turning on genes or turning off genes. And what you would have to do is transform on a genetic level to activate the dormant potentials for telepathy and to deactivate the limiters that have been spliced into people. So I would say that some people in this world have been more effective at overcoming the genetic limitations and at reawakening their own inner capabilities. So yes, 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 you can absolutely cultivate these capacities in yourself as an individual and in yourself as a community. This is the awakening of your light body. As you do this, though, this world, as you transform again into a telepathic society, you have to establish rules of ethics and rules of proper social conduct. So like in this world, we wear clothing when we go outside. I was telling you about like, if you're on the sidewalk, like please be dressed appropriately for being on the sidewalk. Please do not wear what you would wear like in your private bedroom or bathroom situation on the public sidewalk. People in this world have to become properly trained or acculturated to how you respect other people's boundaries and how much you share and what privacy is and what personal sovereignty is. Because even if I could read you like a book, I would not presume to make you do something. And that's why leadership in Atlantis is very different than the way it looks here, because here leaders force you to do things. It used to be kings would force you to do something. Here I'm looking for like a pen at sword point. They'd be like, look, kid, do this or I'm gonna chop your head off. And you'd be like, all right, good, you're in charge, I listen to you. Great. It's kind of like bully on the playground type of stuff. But that's not how our power dynamics are in Atlantis. And so in this world here, if you simply gave everybody a magical pill that made everybody telepathic, I think there's even like a couple of TV shows or Twilight Zone episodes about this, everybody would kill each other. To be like, no, we can't deal with this, because you'd all hear everybody's dirty laundry. I'd hear Lanley, and she'd be like, I hate Aurora's dress. No, I'm only joking. Of course, I know that you don't feel that way, but that's why I feel comfortable joking in this way. You'd be like, I hate that dress. I hate that dress. And then I'd be like, pick up my sword, be like, what do you mean you hate my dress? Off with your head. Like, no, we'd never do that because we're friends. But you can comprehend that in this barbaric world with very, very low value system of comprehension and respect, that if you simply added telepathy, it would just exacerbate all of the worst tendencies of this world. So as people awaken, transform on a genetic level, and re-attain their telepathy, you also need to do a total house cleaning and recalibration about your basic value system, respect for boundaries, respect for sovereignty, how you work out conflicts, and how all levels of interpersonal dynamics, and then all levels of world dynamics, because you also live in a world where not just nation states are supported through secrecy, but organizations like intelligence agencies, you call them spies. Like spy organizations thrive on secrecy. They don't like it when everybody knows everything. And in a telepathic world, everybody knows everything. So blackmail exists as a control structure because not everybody knows everything. And that's mostly how your world works. Like people just get blackmailed, like bullied, and their arm twisted into doing certain behaviors. And the organizations that like secrecy, they thrive in that situation. Those organizations are completely disempowered when there is nothing to blackmail anyone with. Because if you're like, well, I've seen all of your nudes, you know what I mean? Like nude pictures, like we can see them all, because usually that's what people are blackmailed with. It's like, okay, you've got nothing to blackmail someone with when you know all of their deepest inner secrets and workings and you've seen all of their nude photos. So those control structures would absolutely wither away or go kicking and screaming into the night. They would not like the loss of their power at all. And yeah, people would have to learn how to be much more gentle with one another, with your deeply held, not just inner secrets, but your traumas. You know, I would never just poke my finger directly into someone's deepest wound or injury. That's horrific. And I don't even condone that in terms of like your current level of psychotherapy and other forms of mind healing that happen in this world. A lot of the time, like you go to an appointment and you just meet this person and you sit down with them and they're like, so tell me your deepest, darkest trauma, right? And it's like that's like sticking their finger directly into, you know, your most sensitive gaping wound. And I don't condone that. It really is something that you should build a trust and a rapport before you share that, if ever. There are some things that it might be difficult to even verbalize and say happened to you. It's a huge vulnerability to talk about these things. And we have to develop a totally respectful way of being able to see one another in those moments of trauma. Because what some of these psychotherapists and what they do, it's like it's a power position where, you know, you're putting their minds into people's deepest woundings. And then like people are very vulnerable. So if your deepest wounding was like you got scared by clowns at the circus when you were a kid, and I was like, I'm your psychotherapist. I'm like, okay, tell me your deepest, darkest secrets. Tell me about those clowns at the circus. And it brings you right down to like the worst moments of your life. And then if I said, well, Lanley, the solution to keep you safe is to always hold on to, this is an anti-clown crystal. It's a Herkimer diamond. But if I gave you this crystal and I said, it's an anti-clown device, and just hold on to this anti-clown device and you'll be safe, you would totally take that to heart. You'd be like, I'm safe as long as I have my anti-clown device with me. You know what I mean? So there's a huge amount of influence that people have over people when they're talking about their traumas and how what is the response to healing about traumas. And we didn't have like the same deep levels of trauma in ancient concurrent Atlantis, but there is the primary wound, the deepest, darkest wound that you all have actually is the loss of Atlantis. It is actually the loss of yourself as a divinely connected immortal being in a community of other immortal beings in a paradise state that would be like the equivalent of the Garden of Eden, and you're not there anymore. And that's actually the deepest injury, because people think that they did something bad, that they got expelled from Eden, that they deserve punishment, that they are, you know, wrong in some way. And that's actually it's the thing that everybody needs to know about. Like, why am mommy, daddy, why am I here? Why does death exist? Why does suffering exist? All of the big questions that religion answers also. These are all answers that go back to the primary wounding of ancient concurrent Atlantis. And people are very delicate in that area of their consciousness, and that whole area for each one of us and as a society requires a huge amount of healing, because it's not just saying like, well, you know, this bad stuff happened and now you're not these immortal gods and goddesses anymore, and that's why you're in this ascension process to get back to light speed. But also, why did it happen? The answers to the why questions are all very disruptive, because they lead to more answers and more questions that are about how was Atlantis invaded, who did it, and what happened to the invaders, because the answer is those invaders pretty much came and never left. And they are what currently runs your psychopathic government, intelligence agencies, worldwide military infrastructures, corporatocracies, and other aspects of production of technology that suppress your consciousness in this world.
So there's consciousness suppression. You're telling me there's also willpower suppression. Uh, is there anything suppressing our ability to intend to get better? Our intentions? Is there anything blocking that ability?
Think that that ability is still powerful. It's like the wish-making ability. Humans still have a lot of that creative passion, and you can still wish for things and intend for things and your willpower and make things happen. But I think that there's a lack of self-belief. So if you don't know that you are powerful, and if you don't know that you have this inner capacity, all of the external stories say to you, quote unquote, you're small, worthless, and nothing, and you're never going to do anything. Just shut up, kid, and also get a job, kid. And then people just kind of stay in those levels of disempowerment. That is actually a fictional level of disempowerment, but people conform to it and uphold it, and then they also see it. They're like, well, everyone else around me is disempowered and I'm disempowered. It's just a disempowered world. So it takes a lot for a person to like straighten their spine and to stand up and say, I am powerful and I am a co-creator in my existence. And then when you build communities around you, you do it yourself and you see the evidences of it in your own life. And then you see the evidences of it with other people, and you come together and you become stronger in this. That is really quite revolutionary.
So we've referenced the Bible a few times. There's some truths and allegories to what's been happening to us. But you've also said that the Bible is a satanic piece of literature. So has it been perverted? Was there something more pristine that was used as like a, hey, this is what's going on, that was actually trying to help humanity? Like why does the Bible exist?
Yeah, without
Oh,
insulting
sorry.
people.
And I'm going to add, there's also this saying that, whatever the evil groups do, they have to share what they're doing. So they do it through movie forms and storytelling and all of that. So what are your thoughts on all of that?
Yes, without insulting or alienating people who have deeply held beliefs, because I'm not here to just diminish people or to disempower you in any way, but I will just honestly express myself. I describe the Bible, which is the original 5 books of Moses, the Torah, and also the New Testament, which is everything that was written after the remembrance of the life of the historical teacher known as Jesus. I call that whole entire thing satanic literature. And I define satanic as literally the technology using space races that are the invaders of humanity. And the it's even beyond a form of literature, it is a form of technology, because the original scrolls of the Torah were always written on parchment, which is an animal's skin. And when you write words on an animal's skin, what you're really doing is creating a magical talisman. Like the life force energy of that animal is added to the words, which is what spelling is, for the expression of a reality shifting proposal. And in this case, the reality shifting proposal has not been very positive for humanity. It's been a set of diminishing, ideas that are being created there. It's not about your uplift. It's not. It's about all the things that basically you're sinners. You're bad, you're wrong, you've done something very, very wrong, you deserve all this bad stuff to happen to you, and then also the world will end. It's all very bad, disempowering stuff. Sorry, I got a little bit distracted because there was like a technological distraction that came through, and then I'm just kind of getting back on track. So that literature was created not to inform humanity at all, but to be a document of your diminishment, kind of like a contract of all the things that you're doing bad and wrong and all of the ways that you're not allowed to improve or move forward. And none of it is cosmic or divine in its origins. These are fabrications. The Bible and the proposals in there about what the definition of what it is to be humans, the limitations of your consciousness, the entire cosmology involved in there, none of that is accurate, none of that is valid in the sense of universal consciousness. It is a disempowerment contract or a document that is meant to describe to you all of the ways in which you're wrong and all the things that you cannot actually do. And it is vivified or energized with the sacrificial energy of the animal's skin that it was written upon. I know that might be like difficult for people to hear, because in this time and place, people turn to the Bible as a source of direct spiritual truth and as a source of guidance when they are confused in their life. And I'm telling you, it's the exact opposite, that it's not a document that you should turn to for guidance or for uplift, because it does the opposite of those two things. But because real divine intelligence is literally imbued in everything, like real divine intelligence is in the pattern of ocean waves and the pattern of raindrops as it falls from the sky. Real divine intelligence is definitely evidenced in the Bible, and it's also in like the phone book and a coupon from Bed Bath and Beyond. Like, you can find divine intelligence in all these different places. But it's just because it is imbued in everything, because people will go into the Bible and they will find all sorts of numerology and self-referential claims and all sorts of patterning. And I'm like, I know all that stuff exists, but that is just because divinity exists, like even in the pattern of sands across the Sahara or any of these things. Like, it is a self-organizational principle. It's going to come forward in almost anything. So I feel like I went far afield. Help me refocus my answer in your question.
No, that answered it. But I'm
Okay.
going to ask about Christ consciousness, since we're talking about the Bible.
Good.
And, can you explain to me what that is and how? Let me rephrase my question. At what level was Christ consciousness trying to save us from? Are we trying to get out of this earth realm past Atlantis to the Aurora collective level that you're talking of and are from? Like, what level of a master is Christ consciousness? And I would like to know how that looks compared to Aurora consciousness.
I love talking about Christ consciousness, and I love Christ consciousness. And so I'll just frame this by saying Christ is an alive being, is I call it a metacognitive animal. So, time, like the fabric of space-time, is an alive animal. Christ is similarly a level of awareness and an alive being that is comprised of many other smaller viewpoints, in exactly the same way that the multifaceted eye of like a bee, it's a compound eye. It's different than the human eye. It has all these different facets. It looks just like a gem. And all of those different pictures of reality get integrated through the bee's brain into one focused experience of the world. That is what the Christ mind is. And the Christ mind is not just on our planet. It is something that is galactic in scale. That means that there are many creatures who embody the truthfulness of this level of consciousness. And this network of consciousness is really defined by all of these different viewpoints, not just one viewpoint. So in this world that we're talking to on the computer, people have really erroneously imprinted on the concept of Christ being one leader, like a pyramid-shaped hierarchy with one guy at the top, and that guy is named Christ, and he's like the king that tells everybody else what to do. But that is very flawed. It's really coming through your flawed cultural filters and also your flawed monkey primate hierarchy filters, because that's how monkeys work in the wild. They're like, who's the top banana? And the top banana is, the top gorilla, who's usually the strongest guy. And then he tells everyone else what to do, right? So you've translated that into your conception of spiritual presence, but that is not accurate. Because in Christ consciousness, it is very similar to the social dynamism of Atlantis, where if you can talk to 3 minds, you're awesome, or if you can talk to 1,000,000 minds, you're awesome. It's not a pyramid-shaped hierarchy where there is just one important person who then dictates to everyone else. In this network of Christ consciousness, all of these minds are important. All of these minds are special. The minds on our planet or in our world where Atlantis is are all special and unique and important. And we connected our mind state to many other mind states all throughout the whole entire galaxy. So it's like if you're a band or a symphony, you're playing here, but also when you are connected telepathically, you're not just telepathic with the people that are here on your little zone, you're telepathic with everyone everywhere. So we played our music of mind, of consciousness, with all of these other time places, all of these other cultures, all of these other types of organisms who were also evolved to the level of Christ, which means that they were able to get to this level of pure telepathic insight. And the key point is none of us used technology. Technology existed concurrently in the galactic presence, but we didn't use it. Because like, imagine if this is the example of like what technology, this is my little remote control for my treadmill. Technology exists, but we're all Christ. And we're like this is a stupid trinket. Like, you'd be like this, like, what do I need this for? Like, I do not need this thing, but you can use this thing if you want to. So that is really like how disinterested we were in technology and how irrelevant it was to our life. We didn't need technology to amplify what we could do with our minds or to organize or justify what we were doing naturally. And all of it came from our natural directive. And there was not a sense of power contests. So in this world that we're in, everyone is used to power contests. That can be like war, which is nation state versus nation state. Or I talked to you about, I was already socially aware enough, even in the first 5 years of being here, workers versus bosses. Who in power dynamics, who's in charge? Bosses are in charge, workers are not in charge, and many, many other things that you recognize as how power is defined in your world. But in the world of the mind of Christ, you don't have power dynamics. You just have a lot of minds coordinating. So you're not going to have a fight over who's in charge between me and my boss. If I had said to my boss, like, no, you're doing this all wrong, do it like this, he would have been like this, who's in charge? And I would have been like, oops, sorry, you're in charge. Like you pay my paycheck. I would like to have $6, please, and not lose my job. And so everything is different in the world of Christ. You are an equal amongst equals. We don't compete with one another. That's so different in this world here, especially with the very unhealthy satanic literature known as the Bible. Everyone is awaiting who will be the Christ to come and fix and save everything at the end of time. And everybody's jockeying for position. It's like, I'm going to fight and see who's going to be the Christ. Like, I'm going to be the Christ. No, I'm going to be the Christ. It's only going to be one person. And everyone's here like trying to fight it out. And like in the world that I come from, like that's a ridiculous or absurd proposal because we are all Christ. So everyone in ancient Atlantis pre-invasion is, a better way of saying it, is in Christ, is connected to that larger Christ consciousness. And everyone is a contributor. So we all take collective responsibility for Christ, and we also make unique contributions. One person is good at answering the phones, and one person is good at drawing the blueprints, and everybody fulfills their role in this. And that also includes far distant civilizations that can be far distant in time or in space, and we all coordinated beautifully and perfectly. Aurora, in that context, where I am a waveform presence outside of time, is very intimately connected to Christ, but not exactly synonymous. And the distinction is only required in recognizing that the network of Christ is under attack. In the same way that Atlantis is being attacked or assaulted by antichrist technologies that are attempting to crowbar or distance consciousness away from divine connection. It's trying to be a blockage or a wall. Technology comes in and it's like gonna be a wedge and get people that are totally connected to God away from God. But that didn't just happen in our world, or is not imminently about to just happen in Atlantis. That is happening as an assault on all Christs everywhere. So what happened in that primary wounding that brought us into this realm of being mortal and vulnerable and experiencing suffering and death is the same assault that has been happening or going against the entirety of Christ everywhere. And this is really culminating in this time and place where we speak on computers and in Atlantis with the deployment of certain technologies that are literally anti-Christ technologies, that they are meant to blind your Christ eye and to cut you off from that level of community. And what I am as Aurora and what I am as Flying Rainbow Lasagne is a bridge to reconnect you to Christ. So this is why it's worth it for me to make a distinction of how Aurora is different than just Christ, because I am in Christ, both here in my physical embodiment and as a waveform on the larger stellar network, but I'm not just Christ, and Christ is under attack and is imperiled. And what I have been able to do is to create an alternate route. Like if you have construction on Main Street, it's like, we can't get through, there's construction. But I created an alternate route called Flying Rainbow Lasagne that you can use to get to your destination, which is divine connection. So Christ is in its most positive essential form is the bridge or the route to be able to get to divine connection and divine self-remembrance. And it's been blockaded or under attack for a long amount of time. And my spontaneous creation of the Flying Rainbow Lasagne is a higher dimensional detour that you can take to get to your destination. But I'm not competing with Christ. I'm definitely not denying Christ. If anything, I'm like helping you to be able to get back to and re-access what you should have access to, what is innately yours. Like it's already yours. It's been artificially taken away from you. And that's really the justification for how I can do this and why I'm here. It is a restoration of your birthright or a restoration of your true ownership or entitlement. I don't have the right words, but what you really deserve, I'm simply restoring it to you. But I'm a lover of Christ, and a celebrator of Christ, and an admirer of Christ, and I'm deeply connected to Christ.
So when Christ came here as Jesus the man, that was literally the entire Christ network being embodied in Jesus. Okay.
I am cheering. My arms are in the air. I'm like, yes, I'm like doing backflips. That is absolutely true. And there are some writings that are from esoteric Christianity that talk about Jesus in that way, as Jesus being the epicenter focal embodiment of all mastery, of all presence, of all divinity in one body. And that is truthful. And if you know about, it's a mathematical proposal called Indra's pearls. That is a concept of a network of a variety of pearls or perfectly reflective spheres. And every sphere contains the totality of all of the other spheres reflected in it. That is what the network of mastery is. So our teacher from 2000 years ago is the epicenter and distillation of all these other consciousnesses. But if you went to any of those other consciousnesses, it would contain a different person as the distillation, but it would contain our teacher from 2000 years ago, and everyone who is in Atlantis, and everyone who reaches their attainment in this world that we are in right now.
Wow. And just one more question about Christ, because I know we want to get back to Atlantis, but there is a common saying to turn the other cheek, which is something that Jesus Christ supposedly said. What are your thoughts about that? And did he really condone that kind of pacifist behavior? And yeah, what are your thoughts?
Big, big question, because a lot of what he originally taught has been miscontextualized, inverted, and weaponized against you. The best distinguishing approach is to be able to say that he was teaching about embodied creatures with real souls. We need to love and forgive each other, or offer compassion to ourselves and to one another as we are learning. But this is very, very different than saying compassion and forgiveness is being given to every single organism or individual in the world. Because I talked to you about the invaders from Mars who are either imminently invading Atlantis or have already done so, and basically evil or very malevolent levels of consciousness that when you are told to love your neighbor, it does not include like evil demons. It does not include invaders from Mars. Those are not your neighbor. And this is really important stuff. And even though in this level of reality we find ourselves in, those invaders have been integrated into human genetic code and human society. They are your oppressors. They are psychopaths. So the psychopathic tendencies in people's genetic codes, that's like the tendency to use violence non-righteously, to violate other people's boundaries, to steal from other people, to, the worst characteristics that are here, that are, bad, harmful characteristics. Those do not arise from your true nature, which is what you are in Atlantis. In Atlantis, you are divinely connected and generous and purely good. And it's not like that person has been taken and then smooshed into a grotesquerie of evil. What has happened is that goodness has been taken and then spliced onto or grafted onto a grotesquely distorted thing that came to your planet. You're not supposed to love that grotesquely distorted thing as if it is your neighbor. You're supposed to love the actual true essence of a person's soul and forgive the true essence of a person if they make mistakes to you. So like Lanley, in your personal being, you might be like 89% awesome, 89% of you is your real soul and who you are in Atlantis, and you might be 11% psychopathology. That can be cultural stuff and things that people lied to you about, and other people's trauma that they put on top of you and other things like that. And in my interpersonal relationships with you, if I follow the teacher who came here as Christ, I would be loving you with compassion and being forgiving of you, your soul, but not the aspects of you that are behaviorally psychopathic, that were actually injected into your biological lines ages ago, non-consensually, that's not even the real you. And so this becomes really challenging, because when people are dealing with like someone who's in addiction, there is a real soul who's a real person who's good, but the addiction is psychopathology. That is not the real person. But people who are in addiction, they destroy communities. Their out of control behavior destroys families, destroys businesses, destroys communities, and you can't just be endlessly forgiving of them. Like, I'm sorry that you, whatever, smoked crack rock, and now you have destroyed our household, but here is more crack rock, like smoke it again. Like, you can't do that, because the doctrine of forgiveness is, and turn the other cheek is like, okay, you did it wrong, do it wrong again, do it wrong a million times. Like, we can't do that. If someone is smoking the crack rock and they do something wrong, we can't be like, I forgive you, and turn the other cheek, do it wrong again, because they will continue and destroy the world. We have to set boundaries. So I really promote a concept of love, forgiveness, and self-compassion, but also very, very strong boundaries. And this also relates to when we talk about doing shadow work or any kind of inner introspection work to resolve what is dark behavior or malevolent behavior. I propose that not 100% of what we see in our world is of divine origins. Like shadow work says, like, it's all God and it's all me, and I hug and embrace it all. Sorry, I'm knocking things over. I hug and embrace it all as me. It's all part of me, even the bad stuff. And I'm like, technically that's not true, because technically our planet got invaded or is about to get invaded, and a bunch of stuff came here that's not you. And if you embrace it as if it is self, it is living a lie. And that the truthful thing is to create very, very strong boundaries, and not to embrace that as a lie. But all of this requires deep levels of activated intuition. Like, how can you look at yourself and know who is the real me? What is my real soul? What is my divinely connected self versus what is the psychopathological implant of self that wants to smoke a crack rock, right? And when you think about that, like, why does addiction exist? I hope I'm not offending any crack users out there, but why does addiction exist? Because of escapism, because of people who are not loving themselves. They are not in compassion towards themselves. They are not in acceptance of either their personal experience or their personal empowerment. Like you asked about what limits people from their wish making or their own empowerment, and it's this negative story about disempowerment. People smoke the crack rock because they think they are disempowered and they want to escape from their horrible lives. If they stopped taking drugs and engaged with their lives and started to become actively empowered as a wish manifester, then they could manifest all the things that would make them feel truly happy, that don't have to do with covering up their bad feelings with chemicals. All right. Yeah.
Very clear. Thank you. Okay, so in the past video, you said you guys don't experience fear in Atlantis, so you needed to find a timeline where it can be defeated or it hasn't happened yet. And it reminded me of the Galapagos Islands, where you can visit all the animals and they're not afraid of you because no one attacks them. But I also thought that was really interesting. Um, you also said that we could talk to people in the past now to prevent this. So how do we do this? And did you need to come to this plane where violence exists to talk to the past from now and this timeline? Sorry. I don't know if that question was clear. It's kind of complicated.
Totally clear.
Okay.
You're bravely navigating this time language, which is not easy. That's why I am clapping for you. And I'm also clapping because it's a very perceptive question. The answer is yes. I needed to come into embodiment form, into a body that actually has DNA and can eat bagels and pizza in order to do this work of being able to retroactively heal time. So I talk about my present existence as like backbending into time. Like my feet are in the future and I'm doing a backbend into this moment now. And through doing that, I am planting the seeds in this moment that are going to cause incremental shifts so that you will have a different outcome. And the outcome, if I hadn't done this shifting, would have been imperilment or extinction. And that would have affected me in the time that would be considered the future or the time outside of time, which is why I had to do something. Like if you look around, if you live in the higher perspective of time and you're like, oh no, if I don't do something, like I'm not going to exist anymore. I better do something. And so it was necessary for me to get a body that is connected to DNA, because when I'm a waveform, I don't have DNA. I'm an impulse on the network of stars. So I needed to get a body with DNA to be able to be active on the network of DNA, to be able to plant these seeds in DNA, but also to shift your culture through my presence, because I do a lot of work on the abstract level of my body and what my DNA is doing and how my dance is affecting others around me. But clearly, I also have a very overt purpose. I am visible. I'm not hiding at all. I make artwork and music and other forms of public sharing because I'm trying to plant these consciousness, these concepts into your society to shift how people think and feel. So there's rules about how much you can influence other people's cultures. And as a star being at the level of the galaxy, how appropriate it is to reach into the younger levels of consciousness as they're just evolving. Like, it's just like, if you were a highly industrialized culture and you went to visit the Amazon Indians and you brought a little lighter, like a big lighter with you for cigarettes, and even if you just casually lit your cigarette and they saw you do that, that would be mind-blowing to them. They'd be like, they had this little thing and then fire came out of the little thing and then they put it in front of their face. Like, you would be mind blown by that, and it would be a casual gesture. So this is the sense of like just being exposed to certain ideas or evolved technologies when you're an evolving culture can have a huge impact upon you. So a lot of the self-responsibility in being a telepathic presence and speaking across time is in not unduly influencing a young culture through errant, information. You have to be really specific. Like, if you went to the simple people that have never seen a big lighter, instead of just showing them that technology, you should say to them like, here's a primer on technology. Like, this is what exists in the world. Like, here is how it's affecting our world, instead of this, uncontrolled way of having information get around. So I have to be super selective and responsible in the way that I share information in this time place, because I want to be sharing information so that it is appropriate to your comprehension level and empowering to you, so that you take these concepts and it improves your existence and makes you move into better levels of divine connection. And that's not, there are lots of extraterrestrial visitors that are here that are from technology using cultures. They don't care. Like, they're here to exploit humanity and to treat you like shit and to steal from you and to rob you. And they don't really care what happens if you see them use a piece of their technology. Like, your mind is being blown and your whole entire world view and architecture are falling apart. They don't care that they are dismantling your architecture like that. They are just here like robbers, like pirates, to steal stuff. And I am here as a world builder to construct stuff. And it's much harder to construct things because you have to measure things and make sure that all the angles fit and make sure that it does things in exactly the right way. So everything that I do and say here in this time place as Aurora is very highly calibrated to affect the people around me, to affect your whole entire culture, to bring you back on track. I didn't have the words for it, but back into alignment with who you're supposed to be, and to reach the ascension that you really were. You had ascension interrupted in ancient or concurrent Atlantis, but to rejoin with that inevitable level of your self-expression, self-awareness. And yes, that's even like when I was working at my silly custom framing job, I recognized that I was influencing humanity, that I had to take a lot of responsibility. And that was when I was not quite as comfortable with my communication skills. I had to level up a lot. I had to learn a lot of new vocabulary, because sometimes I would say something to talk about a certain topic in this time place here, and people would misinterpret me, and I'd be like, okay, like, that word doesn't mean what I'm saying it, but they're not getting it. So I have always had to refine what I'm trying, the way that I'm trying to communicate, so that people are hearing me correctly and not misinterpreting me. But all of this here and redirection of human culture in this time place is concurrent to redirection of what we're experiencing in ancient concurrent Atlantis. So even like the warnings that I've given to people about the telecommunications infrastructure, like the cell phones and the towers that emit frequencies to make those little machines run, and even the tiny micro machines that go into people's bloodstreams that are happening more recently, like within the past 10 years, all of my warnings to humanity echo my warnings in Atlantis about the impending invasion of technology in that world that has a similar level of consciousness reduction. And so I'm choosing my words so carefully, but basically fixing things on this level of reality radiates outward and retroactively into the past, into fixing everything. So when I say the right things and do the right things here now, it fixes not just this time place, but it fixes every time place that is connected to this time place. But I have to be very selective and highly calibrated in the things that I say. And so I am connected through my mind's eye directly to time. I see time directly, and it's just like fine tuning with some kind of knobs or whatever. Like, okay, what if I say this? And then I look at how I've affected time, and I'm like, okay, got a slightly better, but not perfect. Now I have to say this, and then the entire time field shifts, and then I have to do this. But then more recently, within the past 4 years, it's been like shaking up the Etch-a-Sketch, if you guys know what Etch-a-Sketch is, but like the whole entire thing got completely obliterated. Like I'm like doing this very, very fine, cautious thing, and then the entire thing gets shaken up and obliterated, and then I'm like, I am not okay with this. Now I have to find a whole new way to try to rescue this and, reclaim this artwork. But then we've been doing it, and that has been, like a huge difficulty. But I am impressed by my own longevity and the longevity of humanity right now. Like, you didn't go down the cosmic toilet. Everyone faltered, but you're coming back. And what I'm really referring to is the worldwide health crisis that happened in 2020, the subcutaneous pollutions that happened as an end result of that, because these are genetic pollutions, and anything that affects your genetics is non-local to time and space. And yes, we had DNA, or have DNA, in Atlantis. And yes, it is shaped differently. So in this time place here, people talk about either a reactivation of your DNA or creating 12-stranded DNA. But the most accurate language is to say that DNA behavior and formfulness was very different in Atlantis, and that what you have right here is a limited, squashed, or unidirectional expression of DNA, and that what you need to do is expand into a multi-dimensional expression of DNA, kind of like the way that a pop-up book, like it's flat, but then when you do a certain thing with the pages, the structures come forward. That's what gaining another dimension is. And so that's what I do with my teaching about flying rainbow lasagna. I am constantly trying to educate humanity and teach you about the possibility of making a pop-up book out of your DNA to emerge from the levels of disempowerment that you have been artificially placed into.
Did the FRL exist in Atlantis? Or at what level did you create the FRL? And when did beings start using it?
It did not exist in Atlantis. There was not a need for it. So this is like the detour that you can use to get back onto, the avenue of Christhood. But in Atlantis, we all drove down the middle of the street. Like, this is us, like, like with attitude, driving down the street, like we're doing divine connection. This is awesome, like a big giant parade. So yes, it was not required. We were able to reach our destination very, very effectively. So I created and innovated the Flying Rainbow Lasagna in 2001 of linear space-time, when I, as Aurora, outside of the fabric of space-time consciousness, perceived a great injustice that was happening here now, that if I did not respond to it, I literally would not have existence in what would be considered the future or time outside of time. I had to do something. So I innovated it, although my moment of innovation happened outside of any measured level of time. You guys would say that it happened on October 8th of 2001, and then has been available since that time, but those words don't work because, okay, in cosmic infrastructure, whenever you innovate something, when you have a new thought, it's instantly available everywhere. So as soon as let's say you write a new song, that song is available to people from 10,000 years ago. It's available to people from 1,000,000 years in the future. It's available. And so as soon as I thought the thought of flying rainbow lasagna, before I even came into this world and learned different art, sculptural techniques to be able to make it and show it to people, it was instantly translated or transmitted on beams of light to every place, everywhere, every when. And anyone can have access to it meaning it's like a song that you can pick up a guitar and play. And it is not a secret or proprietary only to me. So think about it as like dropping a pebble in the center of a pool and the concentric rings that expand outward. As soon as Flying Rainbow Lasagna was created or incepted, the potentials for someone to know about it and use it radiated outward into the past, the future, and every layer of reality. It's actually a pretty big deal to make a lasagna. And you have to take responsibility for it too. Because like if you make a bad lasagna, what I'm joking, if it's burned around the edges, but if it's bad lasagna and it radiates outward everywhere, everyone's be like, this is bad lasagna. So I want you guys to know, I put a lot of carefulness into the creation of the lasagna, knowing that it would go out across the expanse of all existence so that it wouldn't be weaponized and used against you. Because I have definitely seen how all different tools or techniques or technologies have sometimes been taken and corrupted and used in an inverted way against the very reason why they were created. I created Flying Rainbow Lasagna with a lot of protections in it to make sure that it wouldn't be just another tool for your consciousness diminishment, that if someone who is pathological got a hold of it, they wouldn't be like, oh, great, like now I can use this to smash other people or like make them die or anything like that, that it really is safeguarded on all of these levels from a misappropriation and abuse. Because once you start to do things with time, because this Flying Rainbow Lasagna is all about transmuting or changing the fabric of time. Once you start to do things with time, like you can make a big mess very easily. Like a small thing expands and exponentially craps on itself over and over and over and can get very big and bad and out of control if you don't put limits on it. So I am a really good artist of time, and that's part of why I've gone through my own levels of self-exploration and experience as a soul to get to be responsible enough to be able to make something like this, because I had to know how to create the recipe and how to form it and how to protect it from exploitation and distortion.
Thank you. So you have mentioned the FRL dance as the fruiting body of the invention of the FRL, and that you actually started sitting in a chair and doing it, and that it actually doesn't need to always have movement involved. Can you share more about what that looks like if there's no movement at all? Is it a being state that you're willing, a visualization? What action is occurring for your DNA to move in that way?
The thing that matters the most is the oscillation of your singularity point. If I hop off of my treadmill to grab my little delicate sculpture over here. So this is the shape of your energy field, which is also the shape of Earth's magnetosphere. I know my sculpture is a little bit broken here, but it's basically a double torus. One torus is at 90-degree angles to the other torus, and that this represents the primal form of energy before you become a Flying Rainbow Lasagna. And what you need to do is oscillate this central convergence point in a higher dimension. So I move a lot, and you can probably tell from all of my walking on a treadmill and other things like that. So for me, that oscillation is expressed as a physical dance. But even if you didn't move your physical body, what you would do is you would oscillate the singularity that is inside of you to a position that is either outside of you or is synonymous with another organism. It's hard languaging there, but to say like you're vibrating a piece of you so that it overlaps with, let's say, the sun, or overlaps with, here's my house plant over here, or overlaps with my dog over here. And that is a non-physical oscillation that then is translated into a new genetic behavior, which is an oscillation or a vibration at the level of your cells. So even if you're just standing here like this, you know, your cells are doing stuff. They're moving, they're grooving, and you have this natural motion of your DNA. what the dance of Flying Rainbow Lasagna is a new way of organizing the motion on a subcellular level of your DNA. And then, of course, that does translate into movements of your physical body and movements of your larger energy field. But let's say if someone tied you in a straitjacket and you weren't allowed to move your arms and legs, could you still lasagna? The answer is yes. Let's say you had a spinal cord injury and couldn't move your arms and legs. Could you still lasagna? The answer is yes. And I actually have someone who's one of my students who has a spinal cord injury and they have some level of paralysis. And I have communicated to them many times and mentored them many times that it's not about just what the arms and legs of the physical body are doing. It's really about what your DNA and your energy field is doing. And that as you oscillate your DNA and your energy field, you get access and connectivity to more light. And as you connect with more light, more pathways for healing are available in the body. So that means that you might not have had mobility of all of your limbs, but you start to gain mobility of all of your limbs. And this is exactly my journey, that I came here not only with brain injury from the attacks that killed the previous occupant of this body, but then subsequent to that, I also had a spinal cord injury that diminished my sensations in my lower body and like how quickly I could get my legs to move. So yeah, for many years, I danced either sitting down or sitting in a chair or sitting on the ground, just pretty much from my torso up. And as I did my dance, my spinal cord healed and improved. And I got more signals going all the way down my legs. And I remember it was like 2015. So I had already been here for 14 years, but that was a momentous occasion because that was when I first was able to like feel sensation on the bottoms of my feet. Because up until that point, I had felt like I was always floating. Like I didn't really feel the bottoms of my feet and my lower legs when I walked around. I know. So I had a lot of balance issues. I couldn't quite feel and sense where I was. I, navigated my life pretty well. People wouldn't have known about this from just looking at me, but I couldn't really walk many miles comfortably. And so like, I've been walking for over an hour and a half here. We've been having our chat. Clearly, I walk very effectively now. And all of that I attribute to doing the Flying Rainbow Lasagna, an energy maneuver that has created healing and paths for transcending physical injuries in my physical body. And you could think of it as a bridge of light that like I get around any neurological injuries on a bridge of light. That is how I get these signals to go around to where they need to go to. And yeah, if anybody ever, if the lasagna had like a light switch, and if you turned off the lasagna, like I would be very bereft because I'm like, I need the lasagna to be able to like make my mouth move, make my arms and legs move, be able to have vision out of both of my eyes and use my balance of my body. So for me, lasagna is essential. Doing the activity of lasagna is a constant neurological and genetic compensatory mode that I do to be able to be in this body, because I'm not even hyperbolizing here. If I didn't have lasagna and if I was not able to be in my body, this would just be like either a vegetative body, like just in a coma, or not even alive. So I am always doing a lot of energy work to be able to send life-affirming signals through my body. But I share that with people not only to talk about my own journey, but also to give a lot of uplift for anybody that's got body injuries through, increasing, through doing energy work. You can expand the definition of what your abilities and mobility level is or are. So my healing has been over the past 20 years and even continues. Like for me, within the past couple of years, I've only just started to run, but I run at very slow speeds. I run at like 2 miles an hour, which most people are like, Aurora, like that is technically walking. I'm like, no, it uses different muscles. So, because when you walk, you go like heel, toe, but when you run, you kind of like run on the front of your toes. So I'm like, no, I am running and you're getting a little bit of my attitude, but I just don't run very fast. But for me, it is quite miraculous because I used to not have that architecture to be able to even get my feet to move at that level. So yeah, one day you guys will see me running at 3 miles an hour. And then I'll be like, look at me, I'm doing awesome. But I say this again, so it's an example that you can apply to your own life. If you have limitations or injuries or developmental, things that happened when you were developing in the womb, limitations, you can really redefine them and transcend them. But also please know that it's not an overnight process. For me, it was not snap your fingers, instantaneous. It took 20 years and it continues onward.
But the fact is, you healed all of that, and that's amazing. So the oscillation of the different singularity points from one organism to another, is that happening in your third eye, or where are you starting that from? Where are you initiating that from?
Yes, you can envision that as initiating from your third eye. You can also envision it as coming from your heart or kind of like the center of your upper thorax. I sometimes envision it as coming from the center of every cell of my body, like every nucleus of every cells. But that's a pretty complex envisionment. Like we're talking about trillions of focal points in your body. But so if you're a beginner, it might be easier to just begin with one that is a representative focal point of everythingness. And yeah, envisioning the center of your head as like the center of your mind, I think is very effective. There's not a right or a wrong, because we are into levels of like poetic allegory where you're using symbolism to express an energetic truth. But yeah, center of your head, pineal gland is a perfect place to envision that happening.
I see. Okay, wow. Some more questions about Atlantis. Are there any hints of Atlantis on Earth? For instance, I see floating skies in movies and ancient mythological stories and Asian operas. Do you see hints of it at all?
So the myths of floating cities and things like that are beautiful oral traditions and cultural myths. There are some things in the Atlantic seabed. Hey, Master Cheeky has arrived. I don't mean to interrupt the recording of your video, but I just want everyone to know Cheeky's here. We might need to have a little bit of a hug, a little bit of a hug. Doing great, doing great, super fantastic. Cheeky loves Landley. Cheeky is Landley's best friend. They're BFFs. Yeah, good. Okay, this is what I want to describe. What did our like architecture look like in Atlantis? Because although we were very connected to nature, we did have edifices, but we didn't have private property. Like this is my apartment that I live in, but we did have spaces that we would create. But those spaces were very much about the inside and the outside being the same. So like here in my world, you have like the doors and the windows, and there's a very different sense of like the inside versus the outside. And you close the door so that way your heat or your air conditioning doesn't come outside. But if you can imagine, like some people live in a perfect climate, maybe like Hawaii or some very beautiful warm place where it's like you don't have to worry about always keeping out the heat or always keeping out the cold. You can have your doors and windows open. In Atlantis, there were not 4 seasons. This was before crustal displacement and before Earth going on her axis. In the perfect balance of Atlantis, we didn't experience death as individual creatures. You didn't have the 4 seasons. So you didn't have wintertime and coldness. You had basically a beautiful tropical / temperate, constant temperature scale everywhere. So you didn't have to have buildings that were sealing you in. And also you had your own personal energy field to keep you happy, warm, well-fed, safe, and comfortable. So our buildings and our architecture were very much a seamless integration between the outside and the inside. And that is one of the concepts of Flying Rainbow Lasagne, where like your inside dreams and hopes are exemplified in your outside materialistic reality. And I think I shared this with you already. Like, we didn't wear shoes, and you were supposed to be connected to the planet at all times through your feet. So we would never wear foot coverings, and every place was perfectly manicured. So you would never step on broken glass, and you would never step on like dog do or whatever, a pile of garbage or something like that. Like, there's a lot of reasons why I wear shoes in our current world, but I would like to be able to walk around barefoot. Like, there are some radical barefoot people that walk around right now, but I'm not one of them, because I'm like, I don't want to step on broken glass and I don't want to step on dog poops, right? But we didn't have those problems in ancient concurrent Atlantis. So we were able to always be comfortable and always be free with our feet. But before we came into what we call an inside space, you want to clean off the bottoms of your feet so that you're not, like disheveling the ground in the inside space. So almost every building had like a little small stream in front of the entryway, and you would walk, and then you would walk through the stream and your feet would get wet. Then on the other side of that would be like a little bit of moss, and you walk on the moss and your feet dry off, and like, it's just perfect. And that was just a natural part. We took it for granted as much as we would take things for granted, but it was a normal thing. Like, yes, of course, like this is how we do this. And so we did a lot with like creating water features, the flow of water, sculpting with water. We had a lot of places where we intentionally had crystalline mineral structures that had pools of water. And those pools of water were not for us to drink because we didn't get thirsty, but it was for us to bathe within, not for just like hygiene or skin health, but to receive energy. So in that sense, our nighttime activities were to float in repose in semi-dreamlike state in pools of charged crystalline water. And just imagine like the most luxurious, like a giant piece of rose quartz that's got a beautiful, bottom that's nice and smooth with the most beautiful waters in it, and just soaking in that all night as part of your dream experience. Also, the waters of Atlantis were gentle. Like, the quality of water was different in that time place because water takes on imprints, just like, the work of Dr. Emoto and how water can, change its shape and its texture. Here in this world, the oceans are dangerous. Like, I'm telling you, I don't go in the ocean. Like, I lived like very close to the beach on the southern coast of California. And I didn't go in the ocean. I went in like up to my knees because like the waves are very violent. And there's lots of like, dangerous animals in there, not just sharks, but there's stingrays and all these other things. Like, the ocean is dangerous, okay? But in Atlantis, the ocean was not dangerous. Water was not dangerous because the motion of all of the water was very gentle. So the qualitative of the movement of water was completely different in that time place. And you didn't have to be afraid of like the waves knocking you over or crashing you to the bottom onto like the sharp rocks or anything like that. It was a completely different experience of water. All of the water was gentle, and all water is connected and all water talks to one another. So the present violence of the water is a reverberation of the violences of the crustal displacement and all the things that happened in our world that made this a very ungentle world. And in our world, we have plants that grow inside and outside. Like, it's the most normal thing in the world to have a plant whose root system is outside of a building, but then it grows some branches inside, and then those branches might stick out through the window. Like, that is a normal part of our living space. And that just seems, this seems like intuitive no-brainers. Like, of course, like I have house plants here because I like to have plants inside, and people consider that to be like a nice hobby, but we consider that to be like a part of the architecture. Like, of course, like plants will grow from over here and they will come inward across here, and then they will exit over here. And like, that is all just these things. These are the things that were just completely normal. And also healthy, non-sexualized nudity. Like, in this world here, this is such a hot button issue, but like here, you can't walk around without your clothes you will be vulnerable to sexual violence and a lot of other things that are not socially positive. But in Atlantis, violation of boundaries did not exist. We had a completely different social dynamic as it relates to romance, sexuality, and attractiveness. And everybody was very respectful of everybody else's bodies. And there is no limitation about having to wear clothing while in public. It was the most normal and natural thing to walk around unclothed. And there was no comparison of bodies to other bodies. Like in this world, some people say, like, well, I didn't just wear clothes to protect myself from sexual violence. It's because, like, I'm trying to hide, like, my huge ass or some other body part that I don't want people to see. I hope that I'm being comedic and, you know, people are laughing at themselves here, because I want you to know everybody has a huge ass. Don't feel it's only you. But everybody's wanted to hide their bodies and be like, oh, am I bigger? Am I smaller? Am I weirdly shaped? Am I this? Am I that? Don't look at me. And in Atlantis, each person was totally unique. We have all of these different ranges of skin colors, body shapes, body proportions, facial features, and our beauty standards are much more encompassing than the ones that are the cultural beauty standards of this time and place here now. So there was not a desire, like if I have brown eyes, there's not a desire to have to change my eyes to blue eyes in order to be beautiful or accepted or celebrated in the world. Everybody was celebrated or is celebrated in their unique form. So you don't have to hide what you perceive as your flaws. You don't have to change and shift in order to be able to be beautiful and acceptable. Just think about all of the plastic surgery and all of the makeup and false eyelashes that people put on in order to feel beautiful and accepted. And I'm not shaming anyone if you use any makeups or anything like that. I'm not shaming you. I love you, but I want everyone to feel super celebrated, even with the bare face. Because in this world here, a lot of people get acculturated to always being seen with makeup. And then if they're seen without their makeup, they're like, my face is naked and people can see I don't actually have eyelashes out to here. And it's like, that's okay. It's okay that you don't have eyelashes out to here because you have exactly the right size eyelashes that your face is supposed to have. And we love you with your eyelash face in exactly the way you are. So it was a totally different feeling to have a body. People in this place now are very non-compassionate towards their bodies, very disassociated from their bodies, and are largely expecting to simply die and leave their bodies. But we didn't have that relationship to our bodies. We love and celebrate our bodies, and we have an innate commitment to our body form. I'm like, I love who I am. I love the way I look. I don't want to change or look any different. And I am going to ascend in this body. I want to be like, snap. And I'm going to ascend in my body, you know, up to the levels of pure light. And that's an amazing level of self-love and self-celebration that I recognize in this world. Most people feel very insecure or negative about their bodies, but I want you to know that that's not your true nature. Your truest nature is like not only to be grateful for your body form, but celebratory, where you're like, I love my body. Like I have the best elbows, or my earlobes are awesome, or whatever you feel. Or like how about like, I can do this. Like I swam across the ocean with my body, or I climbed a mountain with my body, or I jumped this high with my body. But we didn't have the Olympics. Like here in this time place, people have some natural athletic gifts, and then you go into a contest and you see who is the biggest, who is the strongest, who is the this-ist. But we didn't do that in Atlantis because, you know, Lanley, if you were able to swim across the ocean, I would be like, Lanley, you're awesome. You swam across the ocean. But I wouldn't be like, I'm going to try to do it faster than you. I'd be like, you did it. That's amazing. But I would be like, well, my divine directive is to run 100 miles over in this direction. And I would do it, but I wouldn't need to do it for a medal or for cameras or anything like that. I would just do it as the natural self-expression of who I am and just the joy of doing that. And so in short, it was not unusual in Atlantis, or is not in time language, unusual to find yourself, you know, watching, like there could be a person or a group of people without clothing on, just running 100 miles, just feeling so happy and great just for the joy of being in existence. or climbing a mountain, or climbing a giant tree, or doing any of the other amazing feats of athleticism that we did. It was not about trying to be more than someone else. It was just the beautiful expression of who we are. So maybe it's similar to the way that some animals are in this time place here. Like sometimes you'll see one of these mountain goats that's climbed a mountain and it's, perched precariously, like at this very tall peak. It's like, it just did it. It didn't do that for the goat Olympics. Like it just did that because it's what they do. Or whatever, there are albatrosses that fly across the entire ocean and their feet never touch the ground, and they go, or birds that migrate, they're amazing endurance athletes, but they are just living their lives. They're just like, yep, yeah, I flew from Alaska to San Diego today. It was great. It's like, this is like 12,000 miles or whatever. Like they did an amazing thing by doing that. I don't think I have that number exactly correct, but thousands of miles. But they are simply doing what is their innate existence. So we simply express our innate existence. We're not in competition with one another, and we're simply celebrating our levels of attainment. And that's just what you do normally. I say, like, that's just what you do in the morning before breakfast. Like, yep, we flew 12,000 miles, and then we decided to hang out for a little while. Like, our lives were calibrated very, very differently then. And we didn't take things for granted, but we did things casually that you would presently consider to be like a superhuman activity. All right.
Wow. So you're saying everyone just ran around naked and everything was fine. And you did say that the Garden of Eden was actually about the implantation of shame. So is that what caused us to cover ourselves up with clothes? I mean, besides the sexual violence thing.
Yes. So the Garden of Eden is really only a poetic allegory, not a literalism, but it's what your cultural myths use to express this transformation of consciousness from being very free and very uninhibited to being very limited and very self-protective. And shame is totally a genetic implant. You did not come here in Atlantis or come here even as a little baby infant in this world with shame. But it is something that is a genetic implantation, and then it is taught to you by older generations. So like when you're a little baby, you're not like, don't change my diaper, like I'm ashamed. You're like, I'm a little baby, like these are this is my butt, like this is my whatever excretory organs, like this is where things happen. Someone else is touching you, someone else is doing things with you, you're not feeling shame. But then as you grow older, it is imprinted upon you what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, and what is private and what is not private. And then people learn to be shamed. So that is a big part of the story of the Garden of Eden. It's not even really learning about how to be clothed or what is a private part, but it's also an alienation of oneself from one's own body, that the church really taught people not to touch themselves. So it's not just the sense of wearing clothing to be appropriate in public, but the church taught people to be alienated from their own bodies, their own reproductive cycles, and their own body desires. And none of that is healthy. So even if you wear clothing was also necessary, not just for social perception, but also protection against the elements, because we used to be psychically protected from cold and heat and thirst. And in this time place, you're vulnerable to all those things. So people had to work with animal skins and be able to protect themselves. But there's some really interesting stories that are from the late 1800s that you will not find more modern stories of these yoga masters, but these guys are like the last generation that existed before they started to use electricity on your planet. And they were able to cultivate themselves and their energy field to the point where they were invulnerable to cold and also invulnerable to heat. And they also lived a very, very long chronological life. So they might live for 200 years. So the last of these guys that were like 200 years old were alive in the late 1800s. But I bring them up because it was a 4-year-long process for them to acclimate themselves. But this is the area of the world that is India, that borders right on the Himalayas. They were able to go up into the mountains, and over the course of 4 years, they did not wear clothing, and they gradually acclimated their bodies to be able to not be destroyed by the cold. Then it was these three yogis. They went across the mountains, and again, they did not wear boots and parkas. They went in their body forms, but using their cultivated energy field to protect them. And they were able to go all the way into Siberia and explore that world. And they did not get frostbite. And one of those same yogis was said to have, in his levels of attainment, protected other people. Like one guy was in a forest fire, but that yogi was able to get through the fire, that he was invulnerable to flames as well, to rescue that person. So these are examples of what can happen in your present body through discipline and self-cultivation in a pristine environment. That you don't have that same pristine environment anymore. But if you could get rid of all these satellites and all this electrical stuff and everything like that, and then go to the Himalayas for 4 years and then be taught or mentored by an expert, you could do this too.
Wow. Okay. One more question. We have time?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do have time.
Are the people who made this current Earth realm the same people that made the moon?
Yes, absolutely. Really great question. The moon is an artificial construct. It is not a natural astronomical body. It is artificially created, and it is created as a consciousness reduction mechanism. And it absolutely coincides, the creation and placement of the moon exactly happens at the same time as the catastrophe that destroys Atlantis. And it's same factions that did that created the moon.
A consciousness reducing. So does that mean that what happens to us once a month when it's out, like us going crazy and everything, like is that what it's doing? Or because some groups, like some circles are saying that, oh, whatever comes to the surface, it's like for awareness, you're supposed to work on it, shadow work, all that stuff. What do you have to say on all of that?
Big yes to disruptions of behavioral patterns, but bigger yes to disruptions of reproductive patterns. It is said that humans are the only mammal that mates out of its season. So most mammals have a mating season, like humpback whales or dogs, that they are not always fertile. They are usually fertile once a year or twice if you're lucky, right? And that means that there's not always this opportunity for them to be impregnated and to make the next generation. It's only humans that have a monthly cycle. And you're like, girl, tell me about it, right? I mean, I'm being a little bit silly and a little bit casual here, but women can all relate. Like, yes, I know we have a monthly cycle, and it means you go to the drugstore and buy your pads or your tampons or whatever, because you're gonna have to take care of this. But we're the only mammals that have a monthly cycle. And this is actually a sense of hyperfertility or overly augmented fertility from your natural cycles. And it is part of a diminishment and disempowerment of women, because pregnancy is an inherent vulnerability. When you are pregnant, you are not able to do all of the activities that you would ordinarily do in terms of food procurement and food production. And you also require more food, more water, and more rest. And the hormones like estrogen that are required to sustain a pregnancy are inversely proportional to the ability to build muscles. That when women have estrogen in our bodies, it just makes it so that we don't build muscles as easily because you're busy building life. And that means that you don't have the same body shape and size as someone who has not a lot of estrogen. And so you can't necessarily fight for your existence or run as fast or do any of these things. So I'm telling you that far from it being an empowerment, like, hooray, I can have babies, I have 12 opportunities every year to be able to have babies. That was a severe diminishment to women, especially in times of profound darkness, cultural darkness, when women were not allowed to explore or know about birth control, when it was a male-dominated society. And that meant that women pretty much spent their entire fertile adulthood pregnant. That was known as the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages. Women were never not pregnant. They were always pregnant. They had a huge diminishment of not only their personal freedom in terms of being able to direct their own lives, but also like just basic calcium, basic minerals. It was very depleting of women of their basic minerals for sustaining their own body. And then childbirth itself makes women very vulnerable, and then for infections, and then recovering from childbirth, and then caring for all of these babies, and a lot of the babies did not, there was a high infant mortality rate. All of this was a disrespect of life. You would think like greater fertility means greater respect for life, but actually over fertility was a disrespect for life, because humans created excessive numbers of infants and small children under very impoverished circumstances, and not all of the infants survived. So it is much, much more sensible to be able to be fertile like once or twice a year, and only have a couple of babies in adulthood, and not have whatever, 22 babies, but only one of them survives. Like, that is not positive and good. So yes, the over fertility is one aspect of consciousness reduction. And the other aspect is, I would call them breeding experiments. You can see I struggled to find the right words, but artificial partnering, that the moon influences people to be romantically inclined towards partners that they wouldn't ordinarily be attracted to. And this has an impact on genetic expression of the next generation. So when the moon is out, there's like, it's been so deeply enculturated that you might not notice this, but there's all these songs about like, the moon was out and then I felt amorous and I found this person and then we made babies together, right? Or movies that are about this. It's about like what romance is, but this is not necessarily about finding ideal partnership. It is about finding a mate for one fertility cycle, and that is not optimum partnership. So the influence of the moon has been disempowering, in that it has been causing people to come together in reproductive partnership as mates, making offspring, but then they're not personality-wise well suited to one another. They're not actually building family. They're not actually building community. So then you just have more people, but the new babies are not being raised in a supportive environment. And that's because the moon is making people get together that they would never get together. They get together because the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, right? It influences you. That's what the song says. And then you say, I love you. Well, I love you. Let's make a baby. And you make a baby, and then you're together with the baby, and you're like, what did I ever see? And you get out of my life, and then you get divorced, or then you split up or whatever. And it's because these people were never meant to be together. They were artificially brought together. And that's the moon's influence. And also the creatures that built the technology that the moon is doing breeding experiments on the planet. It's very disrespectful, because it's disruptive not only to you and your existence, but to your future offspring. Because, in colors, like in color mixing, like yellow plus blue makes green. So if you want to have a green child, you're going to make sure yellow and blue get together, so you make a green child. But what if you don't have yellow and blue get together? What if you have red and blue get together? Then you will have a purple child. But maybe you were not supposed to have a purple child. Maybe that was totally artificial. That is the type of disruption that the moon is doing. It's creating characteristics that are coming together that would never come together naturally. It would never happen. But it's like Cupid's bow. That's the myth of this little impish angel that flies around shooting people with an arrow and making them fall in erotic love with each other and make babies together, and then laughing, like, and then running away. And that's basically the story of Valentine's Day. Like, you will get shot with Cupid's arrow, you will find a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you will have like very not well considered partnership together, you'll make baby, and then you will run away from each other. Like, this is not healthy.
That makes so much sense. I always thought it was unfair that women bled for 12 times a year and still survived. This makes so much sense.
Totally. And some people do talk about how when they go through levels of inner attainment as a woman, that they don't lose their period completely, but what they do is they find they are more in control of it, and they have it less often. And that's not the same as like when women don't eat enough, or like elite athletes with a minimal body fat that lose their period. This is about just diminishing the hyper fertility that is part of the uncontrolled body form, that as you start to learn more about your body and control its processes and honor its processes more, that you might have your menstrual cycle less often, and it's also much less wearing. Like a lot of women do find that it leads to anemia or other painful experiences. It's not always like functional. Like some women are like, yeah, like I had my period and I ran around and did all these things. And some women were like, no, I had my period and I like stayed in bed and felt not that good for many days. So you're correct. Like a lot of the time it takes women out of the game because of physical discomforts. And when you achieve levels of greater levels of, let's call it like personal cultivation, a lot of times that you have fewer periods, or they become much more comfortable and manageable, so that you can live your life and do everything you need to do.
Thank you, Aurora. Well, this was an
Yeah.
amazing conversation. You answered all of my questions, and even though we digress a little bit, everything you talked about just gave me so much insight, and I'm sure it will to everyone as well. Are there any more details or anything else you'd like to chat about?
There's so much I would like to chat about. I would be like, we should have let's do this again. We'll have a cup of tea. We'll talk all about everything. Because there's so much to say. And this is so enjoyable to me. You're really asking me to talk about like my hometown. If it's like if you ask someone where they come from, be like, yeah, like it's my hood, it's my hometown. This is what it's like in my world where we come from. And I am so fond of that place. And I very much wish to not only tell you guys about it so that you can pine for it longingly, but I want to plant the seeds so that you are like, wow, like places like that exist. And then maybe we could even recreate or make anew a better version of what we have experienced. So I'm hoping to really plant the seeds of motivation and inspiration for people to know what is even possible in this world. And you're not going to want to escape. Like people are not, when we do this and make this world a paradise again, you're not going to want to fly to Mars in a clank clank metal spaceship. Definitely not. So you're not going to want to leave the planet. And if a clank clank metal spaceship comes here and says, come on board with my spaceship, I will fly you elsewhere, you'd be like, no, no, thanks, really. I like where I live. I like what's going on here very much. Yes, and you will not ask questions like God, like why am I being punished? But like why I'm in this crappy world, why am I being punished? Like you will look around at a paradise and you will be like, wow, like I am being rewarded and celebrated with every minute of my day and every step of my existence. Your whole entire worldview will be redefined in that level.
That's a really exciting and beautiful note to end on. We have a lot to look
Yeah.
forward to.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aurora, so much.
Very welcome. Thank you for thank you for initiating this conversation, Lanley, and for all of your very well thought out, very well formed questions.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Okay.